Oh, you know what I love?
Sports.
Love sports.
Sports. When
It comes to Texas A&M.
Where are you getting this information?
Let me tell you.
Welcome to TexAgs.
I need to talk a little sports with you, Ags. David Nuno here with TexAgs Radio. Billy Liucci here on TexAgs Radio. Olin Buchanan.
We will develop men, we will graduate players, and we will win championships on the field.
The best way for us to win is to do it together.
Do you realize everybody knows who you are right now?
I think we're coming into this year with a new confidence.
Schools are like, we're freaking Texas A&M, man. Like,
that's about as pretty a throw-catch combo as there is.
I saw the safety roll, the slot fade. I knew where I needed to put the ball.
You had no other option but one hand at that point.
Yeah, man, 50-50 ball, I got to come down with it.
You know, if I'm betting on anybody, it's the Aggies.
Happy Wednesday morning, Aggies. This is TexAgs Radio presented by David Gardner's Jewelers inside the Rollo Insurance Studio. This is the Go Hour presented by the Warehouse at CC Creations. And joining me at the desk today, because I am not David Nuno, but we do have one Olin Buchanan. OB, good morning, sir.
Good morning, Dalton.
Nice to see you.
It's nice to be seen. Good to be here it's good to be here feeling pretty decent for a change. You know, I've been dealing with sickness and then relapses and all these things. And
I mean, now that you say it, Olin, I think it's been since our Christmas party since I've seen you. I've talked to you. I've sent some texts to you, but I haven't seen you since that day.
That was probably the last day that I felt, decent.
Yeah, and then
because it was the next day that I woke up with the flu, but I'm good now.
Good now,
in a new year. Happy New Year. Happy new Texas A&M coaching staff. Happy new everything.
New era of Aggie Football is what Aggie Football tweeted on Monday morning. This is our first show of 2024. David's out the rest of this week. I've got you today. Kay's hosting tomorrow, and then Richard Zane on Friday. We got a fun show today. Of course, we got the whole first hour with Olin. We'll talk the Rose Bowl. We'll talk the Sugar Bowl. We'll talk clock management. And we'll talk about the staff Mike Elko is assembling as some news broke on that last night. We'll get into that and more at 9 o'clock because Billy Liucci is in studio for the entire 9 o'clock hour. 10 o'clock Recruiting Country with Ryan Brauninger, and then 10:30 John Harris, footballtakeover.com, and then Kay Nagley will bring us home with Around Aggie Land. But, OB, let's start, I guess. We're in a good mood here, and I think a lot of people watching and listening to this show are going to be in a good mood because a certain orange team is no longer playing football this year.
I'd be lying if I said I wasn't rooting for Washington, right? But I'm a little bit different in that Texas doesn't matter to me, right? I'm not going to root for them, don't get me wrong. But it's hard for me to get too excited that Texas lost in the championship playoff while my team lost in the Texas Bowl.
And maybe it's not excited, but I just didn't want to have to watch them again.
Oh, I didn't either. I was rooting for Washington. Yeah. I'll admit it. And by the way, I think as great a coach as Kalen DeBoer is, I think he just showed that he too can get better by learning better how to manage time. You get a lot better in clock management. I don't know what it is about coaches that don't understand that when there's no time left on the clock, you win. You can win. But that said, they did a great job. Michael Penix was amazing. And by the way, the other team that I wanted to win won, Michigan. So I'm really looking forward to that matchup next week, Michigan and Washington for the national championship.
It will be interesting. And, we talk about all these matchups. We look at, there's stats from the Rose Bowl on Monday. It's kind of funny. The 1 and 2 seeds won, but the 1 and the 2 seeds, according to Vegas, weren't the favorites in either of these games.
Yeah. Yeah, I see, Vegas, and I get it. But here's what I'm glad about. Now, understand that I really detest Alabama. A big part of it is jealousy. another big part, or the bigger part of it, is their fans that are even, in my opinion, worse than Texas's. And what if I would have had to, if it had been Texas and Alabama? You know, who do you root against? Now, most people say, yeah, absolutely Texas if you're an Aggie. I get that. But my disdain for Alabama and, you know, and all that the Alabama fandom is about, it would have been maybe not even watch the game kind of thing. So the two teams I wanted to win won, and I assume that Michigan will be favored next week.
I think so. It looks like they're a 3.5-point favorite as we got on the screen now. I think in that scenario, if you'd have had Alabama and Texas, I never could root for Texas, but I think I could have found it easier to stomach rooting for Alabama because I would have played it up in my head of Saban's going to win and retire and then move on, and then we're going to get something different. And it only would have extended this already super silly college football silly season of the University of Alabama changing coaches this late, and what domino effects that would have throughout the SEC and college football would be. That's how I would play it up to myself, although it would probably never happen.
As of today, who would you pick to win the national championship?
I'd pick Michigan.
Yeah, I think I would too.
If you made me pick today.
I thought Jim Harbaugh did a masterful job coaching in that game. And I saw Paul Feinbaum talking about it, and Paul rankles me a lot, but I thought he was right on the money. He said, Jim Harbaugh just outcoached Nick Saban and his staff. And here's another thing when I was watching that game that I started wanting to beat my head on the table, It's like the play that they tied it on, Michigan. They had a guy, they moved all this motion around. They had a guy at one spot, and he moved another spot, and then they brought, just all this motion, misdirection, deception, touchdown. And I'm thinking, that's what good coaching and updated offense is. And I just watched 3 years of just lining up and saying, hey, defense, you know what we're going to do. Just try to stop us. And the defense will say, okay, and stop you.
And they seem to succeed quite a bit. Yeah, I think that's the interesting, you talk about the new offense, but that's the Dolphins offense. Sideline to sideline, we're motioning, we're moving. It's a lot of easy throws, and then when you get lulled to sleep by 5 yards, 5 yards, 6 yards, then they're going to throw it over the top, and they got Tyreek Hill. That's the new age. But I think it's a big thing, and Michigan struggled obviously against Alabama. Michigan's identity is we're going to run it at you. And what'd they do in overtime? Two plays, Blake Corum running right down your throat into the end zone.
What a run to take the lead there.
That's one of those, I think.
But the play, to me, the play of the game was 4th and 2, and they move things around. They move Corum around and get him wide open in the right flat.
And I think it was cool. You saw on the wide shot of that game, as he catches the ball and turns upfield Saban, you can see him say, I'm sure it was a little bit different language, but what are we doing?
Like, oh, shucks. What are we doing?
I mean, he snuck right out. It was a really good call, a really good play, and you got your best player of the ball when it mattered most.
You know what they did?
What'd they do?
They executed.
They did, Olin. They did.
They executed.
They drew up a nice play. They executed it and got it done. I think
it looked like they worked on that play until they couldn't get it wrong.
You got any more?
I'm sorry. That's how I do have some more. You know what? I'm sitting there watching games, and I'm seeing Alabama, that A&M is on the 2-yard line to get within 2 points in the fourth quarter, right? Had the lead. And they're playing the team that's probably going to win the national championship that we think is going to be favored at least. And Alabama has the lead or is in overtime and had the lead late. And A&M was playing that Alabama team, and it was head up. And then I saw Ole Miss go out and just punk Penn State, right? Wasn't it? And, number 10. And A&M has the lead late on the road. Mm-hmm. And then I'm watching who else would I watch? Tennessee. And I know Iowa's not that good, but they're still ranked in the top 20. And Tennessee just completely dismantles them, and you're on the road and have a chance to win that one if your coach understands what a quarterback sneak is. And I'm thinking, look at how close you are if you just update your offense and do things that make sense.
So are you saying they struggled to find the inches?
Yes. You're inches away, and you couldn't find those inches. Yes, that's what I'm trying to say.
This is Coffee Talk presented by TexAgs Coffee. You beat the hell out of morning by going to texags.com/coffee. Let's go into the production room, the fishbowl. I believe Nick Savage is here. Good morning, Nick.
Howdy, good morning, y'all.
How you
Happy
doing?
New Year.
Happy New Year to you. You doing all right back there?
Yeah, absolutely. Good to be back in this chair as opposed to where I was a couple Fridays ago in the host chair. But yeah, it's crazy. First time since 2014, we're gonna have no SEC teams in the college football playoff championship game. That was Oregon and Ohio State back then.
Zeke.
And then it's been nothing but Georgia, Bama, or LSU in that span. But now we got Washington, Michigan. I don't know what to think about the game quite yet. A lot of people on our TexAgs chat saying Washington is the way to go, and I don't know if that's the case. I think Michigan's clearly the better team, but, conflicting styles. I don't know what to think about it.
I think you're getting a lot of the TexAgs people that don't want a blue bud to win, I would think.
I think that Michigan is better at the line of scrimmage, and Washington probably is more explosive.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And Michigan's probably better on the defensive line.
Both sides line of scrimmage.
You think, I don't know, that Washington offensive line, if they had their number one running back, obviously, he got hurt, and that's what we're talking about the whole thing.
Mississippi State transfer.
That Washington offensive line is big and athletic and seems to be able to move. That was my biggest takeaway when I watched them play Oregon in the Pac-12 championship.
Did you notice the Michigan defensive line?
I did. But I don't. If you noticed that Alabama offensive line, this is that team that did struggle with South Florida.
It's true.
But
in week 2. But we can play that game. I saw Washington struggle with Washington State.
Agreed. I think that Washington offensive line is really stinking good.
I think
Joe
it is.
Moore Award winners.
It should be good. You can't be where they are now without a good offensive line.
It is interesting to say we talk a lot on this show about offensive line and being good in the trenches and stuff like that. If I believe I have this correct, or I know Washington won the Joe Moore Award offensive line this year. I believe Michigan won it the 2 years before that.
I believe, and they may be. I could be dead wrong. I get it, and I have been many times. I believe that not only is Michigan's defensive front going to be the best one that Washington has faced all year, I think it's going to be the best by a significant margin, and that includes Texas, obviously.
Yeah, man, it's going to be. I think it's going to be a really fun game. I know Nick said it's not. You don't have an SEC team. It's different. First time since 2014. But it's two teams that I think are relatively fun to watch. Washington's got a really fun offense, and Michigan, I think, is going to try to play bully ball, which, to me, that's fun to watch.
And I think they're going to be successful with that. By the way, I have to admit, I'm a Harbaugh fan, and if my beloved Dallas Cowboys can't win the Super Bowl, I think it'd be great if Jim won the national championship and then his brother won the Super Bowl. Wouldn't that be? That's what I'll be rooting for. If my team
there's
can't win
a pretty good chance of that happening the way Lamar and Baltimore's playing
and then it'll be fun to about this time next week to see the coaching moves start to fall because everybody thinks that Jim Harbaugh's probably the next coach of the Chargers, and then Michigan's going to hire? Are they going to hire outside? Are they going to promote within? If they hire outside, is it going to be Brian Kelly? And if it is, who's LSU going to hire?
There's still a lot on the table, and it's going to be interesting to follow and see. I think we've heard this with Harbaugh for years, that, he could go to the NFL. We know it's been reported he has an extension on his desk from Michigan.
And hadn't signed it.
Why
would he? 3 years ago, they made him take a pay cut.
And he did it.
And he
gambled on himself, and he seemingly won.
But he took a pay cut throughout the COVID year for them that year. But even though he was averaging 10 wins a year.
Yeah.
So I don't know why he would feel like he owes Michigan anything.
And I think the other thing with the other domino that seemingly says he might probably go into the NFL, he did hire an agent, which he has not had since he's been at Michigan.
Right. Yeah.
Represented himself, and now he has hired one of the known NFL agents.
Yeah. And, you know, he started his coaching career. I know they're no longer in San Diego, but he started his coaching career, I believe, at the University of San Diego and won like a D3 or whatever that is, national championship, and that led him to Stanford. So he's knows the Southern California area, probably feels very comfortable there.
It'd be interesting. There's going to be a lot of head coach openings. I've heard the Panthers are interested in him, and I don't know why anybody would go coaching Carolina with the mess that they have.
Well, I think anybody that is that needs a coach is going to be interested in Jim Harbaugh. Where has he not been successful?
Yeah, it's taken a while at Michigan, but I think Michigan was in a place that.
Well, it took a while, but again, he was winning 10 games every year. So
it'll be interesting to see with Harbaugh. All right, OB, let's take a break here. On the other side, let's get into the happenings in Dallas on December 30th. Dan Campbell and the Lions could not pull it off against the Cowboys.
The only time I'll ever root against Dan.
Yeah, although the Cowboys tried to give it to him. You're listening to TexAgs Radio, presented by David Gardner's Jewelers. 8:20 on the Zone, TexAgs Radio, presented by David Gardner's Jewelers. This is the Go Hour, presented by the warehouse at CC Creations. Maroon U is your ultimate shop for brand name apparel, gifts, and accessories for the entire family. OB, I didn't call for that song, but is it time for an Olin sound off? Because Twitter Olin on Saturday night, December 30th, was very sounding off on Mike McCarthy.
Mike McCarthy drives me crazy. I mean, look, I'll give him credit. He's upgraded the offense. He's done a better job calling the offense than Kellen Moore did. But the guy has absolutely no clue about clock management, and he's fortunate that his team has, and sometimes officials, have helped him escape the scrutiny that would come with, making the bad move that costs you a game. But why you would throw on third down when your opponent has no timeouts? They would have. You saw the game. There was less than 2 minutes to go. Detroit had no timeout. It's third down. Just run the dang ball, kick that field goal, and put Detroit in a situation where they have to go 100 yards or probably 75 yards after the kickoff in 40 seconds. As a coach, what you're supposed to do is put your team in the best position to win. And he did not do that. Sometimes just playing small, I get it. If they throw a touchdown pass from, 30 yards, 20 yards, if you throw the touchdown pass, the game's over.
Right.
But what is most likely to happen? Well, you can hope that you are, but you can know that you can drain the clock. And I thought Washington, I talked about it earlier, DeBoer, he's going to make it a 2-score game with less than 3 minutes to go. Texas is going to have to score twice in less than 3 minutes. So it's 2 minutes, 40 seconds to go. He throws a pass and it's incomplete, stops the clock. Just run the ball. At the very worst, Texas has to take one of its remaining 2 timeouts. Then you play prevent, make them use as much time, and if they get the ball a second time, which they did, the amount of time they have to win makes it highly unlikely. And I just don't understand why. I mean, we saw it here. Why coaches now, too many of them, just seem to be clueless when it comes to time management.
It's crazy to me in the NFL. How do these guys not have someone? You don't even have to be a football guy. Just like, hey, I'm going to manage the clock. This is what I do. If McCarthy's going to call the offense or whatever, but you have a guy that knows the situation and knows the math, and I'm sure you could put it on a chart that says, hey, there's this much time. We just need to keep the ball in bounds, run the ball. The clock's going to go out. Like, how is that?
I don't know. I just think think there's so much, and I've said this before, I think there is so much turnover in coaching now that guys become coaches so fast that things like clock management is something they haven't mastered, which is really pretty basic. I mean, I can sit there next to my son and we're watching the game and he's saying, man, you got to run. What are they doing throwing?
Yeah.
Because you just it's not that hard, but it just makes sense. Yeah, do you want to go for the knockout punch? Absolutely. But you were almost, again, the Lions trying to create confusion and confusing the referees allowed you to escape. But it's almost like, I know you're a golfer, so it's like that movie Tin Cup. Why go for the crazy, knockout punch when if you just do the smart thing, you're going to win?
Well, it's funny you mentioned Tin Cup because the other interesting thing of the game was the bad officiating, which led to the multiple 2-point conversion tries. And we'll start with this. That drive that we're talking about where they should have just ran the ball 3 times and started the first play with a missed tripping call that was called on Dallas.
On Dallas, right.
That if you call that against Detroit, it's a 30-yard
Or even if you just don't even make the call.
Don't call the play. Yeah.
If you don't make the call, it's 2nd and 3.
Right.
The clock's running.
Right. Instead, they call tripping on Dallas, and then it's 1st and 25 from midfield, which I don't know. Did that play something into the oh, well, we got to throw now.
Well,
Who knows?
I understood the throw after that on third down, on first down.
You're right.
And you got 11. What I'm saying is,
After that-
in that situation, you can't throw 3 times.
Right. No, I got you. And then so that started the bad officiating. And then it only got worse from there on the 2-point conversion play as Dan Campbell and the Lions had been sending in Dan Skipper all game as an eligible receiver reporting to the official. On their 2-point play, as they got within a point at 19-20, they sent in Skipper as well as another offensive lineman to the ref and tried to basically confuse the Cowboys on who was reporting as eligible and who wasn't. Unfortunately for them, they also confused the NFL officiating crew. Brad Allen, that crew has now been designated by the NFL as not fit to do the playoffs. It also came out after the game that crew also did, after people were just saying, that's the same crew that bundled the Chiefs-Packers game earlier in the year. It had some interesting calls and decisions in. But I think the other Tin Cup reference there, Olin, was Dan Campbell on the 2-point conversion. So he didn't get it the first time.
So now I'm going to do it again.
So now I'm going to go again. And then Micah Parsons was offside, and now I'm going to do it again. And that was the Tin Cup scene that immediately came to my mind of, give me another ball.
Right.
I don't care that I've hit this into the water. I'm going to do it again.
But you know what?
Because here's the thing. I think the Lions had the momentum in that game. If they take that game to overtime, I think Detroit wins.
Very likely. But here's the thing about it. That last play, it was there.
Yeah.
Goff underthrew it. And I guess it's maybe there was some duress or whatever, but the play was there to be made. So, and I'll tell you this, as a Cowboys fan, I was at a point of frustration that I was kind of even fine with them losing that game until the Eagles lost the next day. Then I'm like, man, I'm glad they pulled that out.
Well, and then is it kind of funny? Was that what was playing into Dan's decision a little bit of Dan saying, well, I'm locked into the 3 seed. The Eagles aren't losing to Arizona, I think they thought they weren't moving seeds. So he's like, okay, let's just let it all hang out and go. Now, if he had played it, if you would have fast forwarded the clock and say that game was on Sunday night and the Eagles had lost Sunday afternoon,
it would have been
is he playing that different? I think he is.
Maybe so. We'll never know, but it's a good question. But as a fan of the Cowboys, but I don't know what would be the opposite of fan. A hater,
detest.
A hater, of McCarthy. I was wanting to see him being grilled in the post-game press conference and try to explain
what he was thinking,
how he did not blow the win. But then again, and there's been games before where he's made bad decisions with the clock, but it somehow worked out for him. He's almost got a Les Miles quality to him. But again, now I'm glad they won.
Grass?
Huh?
Is he going to start eating the grass at AT&T?
I would hope he would. He looks like – no, never mind.
Well, as it sits now, the Cowboys are basically a win away in Washington.
And you know what? They have to win on the road where they don't. And I think last year they went up to Washington and lost.
I do believe they did go to Washington and lost.
But there wasn't as much at stake.
There wasn't. I think it's interesting with Washington changing owners.
Well, it's a huge opportunity. They need to win because anybody that follows this team, and I'm sure all our Houston Texans fans are tired of hearing us talk about it.
John Harris is on at 10:30. We're going to talk all the Texans you want.
But they know, if you follow the Cowboys, they're a much better team at home than they are on the road. It's not even close.
It's not even close at all.
So at least you would feel like you have a really good chance to win 2 playoff games because you're going to be at home. Now, McCarthy teams typically choke.
I would like them to play at home to give them the best chance going forward. San Francisco is the 1 seed. I'd like them to only have to go on the road once.
The best chance, right? Because maybe you'll just get lucky.
Yeah, maybe it'll happen what happened to the NFC Championship game last year, and they'll be on their emergency backup quarterback. That might be your only chance of beating them. It does seem like the Super Bowl.
And then you'll go to the Super Bowl and just get the living daylights beat out of you by Lamar Jackson.
Man. The Ravens seem tough to beat. You saw what they did to Miami over the weekend. Scored 56 points.
Yeah, wasn't that crazy?
Didn't even.
They're good. And Justin Madubuike or Matabuke, however you want to say that. I mean, he's what an amazing 3rd round pick for them.
Yeah.
And I think we all knew this. He was going to be really good, and he was so good here. That said, I don't like to overstate anything, but I watched the Texas Bowl, and I came away thinking that DJ Hicks could be another Justin Madubuike. I was so impressed with him. I couldn't believe he only got 2 tackles because he was just involved and wreaking havoc on the defensive line. He was good.
That was to me the interesting thing of watching that Texas Bowl was you got to see the likes of DJ Hicks. You got to see Gabriel Brown
and Marcel. Gabriel played well.
Yeah. Well, I was saying going into it, I didn't expect to see Marcel Reed, although we very quickly did.
Yeah, unfortunately. Fortunately.
Yeah, I liked what we saw, but unfortunately what happened to Jalen Henderson. You hate to see that. It was an awful injury. But, yeah, that's what I was going into the game. That's what I wanted to see. I wanted to see David Hicks play. I wanted to see Gabriel Brownlow.
Well, they played.
And they played.
Well, it makes me come away thinking, maybe you're not as deep in the defensive line next year. Maybe you will be. Maybe this kid from Bryan's going to come back and sign and all these things. But I think I saw reasons to think that they could be still really good and even better in the defensive line because I think you're going to have a defensive coordinator that's going to be smarter about how to utilize people.
And hopefully some growth from Malik Silla going into the next year, get better from him off the edge. But if you say that, if he develops into a good edge guy, go ahead.
The new strength and conditioning coach.
That's
going to make a difference in a guy like Malik Silla. You write it down.
You get him off the edge going. We all liked what we saw from Dindy.
Mm-hmm.
We love what we saw from David Hicks.
Mm-hmm.
You get Shamar Turner back.
Maybe. Let's hope.
It seems to be going that way. That's a pretty salty group.
Get in a couple of these guys from the transfer portal.
Yeah, they got Dalen Evans coming in as a freshman.
Yeah.
It's that group. I'm not worried about that group. Like you said, it may not be as deep, but it seems like they're going to be ready to play.
I think they're going to be good in the defensive line again. I think they could be better because, again, I think they'll be better utilized. And I think I'm hopeful that you're going to have a defense coordinator that says, okay, our rotation is not going to be every single series.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, they played three and out. Now we got to set them down. Like, what are you doing? Oh, the other team just moved the ball into scoring position. Now let's put our durters back in. Like, I've argued with people here. I think DJ Durkin was terrible as a defense coordinator, and I think his absence is going to be one of the reasons that A&M will be better in 2024.
And I'll say this. I think a lot of it was talked about after the Texas Bowl. It's been talked about ad nauseum on the boards, I'm sure on this show as well. They got to be better in the back end.
Yeah, they have to be.
You know one of the easiest ways to be better in the back end?
Get a pass rush.
Get to the pass rush.
Right?
So,
which they did this year.
They did this year. Maybe I think it could be even better. I really used to like what Elko would do blitzing,
yes.
The way he would design some stuff. We always remember Antonio Johnson coming off the edge. I want to see some more of that, and I think that helps. That's the best way to help your back end is to get after the quarterback consistently.
Well, I'm already feel better because of the kid from Kansas State.
Yep, Will Lee.
And I'm not going to mention any names, but I know cornerback was a big point of concern all last year. And I understand why it was. And I'll put it this way, if everybody had come back, it would be a big point of concern.
Yeah.
So I see Deuce Harmon's going to SMU.
He is. A&M has some targets coming in this weekend, hopefully playing corner. I know Brawny will have him on at 10 o'clock in the transfer portal. It's going to be interesting to follow.
nothing really matters until August 31st against Notre Dame and afterwards. Nothing really matters until you start winning games. And that's obviously what Mike Elko and any coach, but Mike Elko now, that's what he's obviously going to be judged by.
Right.
But I have to say that right now, in the month that he's been the coach, what Mike Elko has done, I think has been super impressive. The way A&M has been involved in the transfer portal, what they've been able to do in recruiting I'm talking about the signing day, under less than ideal circumstances. And then the coaching staff that he's put together.
Let's talk about more of that coaching staff on the other side and a little bit of 24. Kind of what you said there got me thinking about the schedule. But I will say this, Olin, I want your very quick thoughts. And you don't have to be quick. How cool was it for Olin Buchanan seeing Jimmy Johnson inducted into the Ring of Honor on Saturday night?
Cool. I wanted to get out a bunch of Aquanet and spray my hair just in tribute to Jimmy Johnson.
You ain't got
the guy that never should have been relieved as the coach of the Cowboys. Should have been. Needs whatever Ring of Honor, Hall of Fame, all those things he should be in. And I feel like had he and Jerry been able to coexist, that team would have won 4 straight Super Bowls, maybe 5. But the decline started. It wasn't immediate, but it started the day he left the Cowboys. And
it's crazy to think how good that team was built by him, that they won without him.
Yeah, I actually read that. I think his name's Jeff Pearlman, wrote that book about the Cowboys and how about them boys or something, whatever. But I read the book, and it was Joe Brodsky, the running backs coach. When they won that 3rd Super Bowl, he told Troy Aikman, "This is the one that you should be proudest of because you did it without any coaching."
Yep, that did happen.
Because Switzer was that big of a liability.
Yeah.
I called Jimbo Fisher a sumo wrestler on Secretariat, and that was Barry Switzer was also a sumo wrestler on Secretariat.
He's Olin Buchanan. This is TexAgs Radio, presented by David Gardner's Jewelers. On the other side, we'll get into Elko's staff as it's taking shape and more. You're listening to TexAgs Radio on the Zone. 841 TexAgs Radio, presented by David Gardner's Jewelers. We are inside the Rollo Insurance Studio. It's Dalton Hughes in for David Nuno this morning, alongside Olin Buchanan on the Go Hour, presented by the Warehouse at CC Creations. OB, breaking news last night from our own Billy Liucci. A&M is set to hire wide receiver coach Holman Wiggins from Alabama to take the same position in Aggie land on Mike Elko's staff. And it's a big get if you consider who Holman Wiggins has coached over the last couple of years. I don't know, maybe a Heisman Trophy winner in Devonta Smith, maybe Henry Ruggs, Jalen Waddle, Jerry Jeudy.
Yeah.
That's some pretty big names.
Hey,
there.
if he's the type of guy that could take the next Jalen Waddle and get him to stay here, then he's worth it. I feel good about this. Talk about the guys they had last year. People say, oh, their receivers weren't that good. Well, maybe not like the ones they had in 2020.
When they can basically put an all-pro NFL team out at receiver.
Right. And then they brought in the kid from Ohio State that's with the Lions now, Jameson Williams,
Williams.
And you can say, well, those guys are good. Anybody can coach them. Okay.
But
he did.
Then you have to give him credit for getting them there.
Did he mess them up?
No.
Have we seen that? Look, here's what I think about Mike Elko that impressed me. And just think about this. Mike Elko coached with Damian Craig.
Correct.
And like the first day on the job, if not the first one, the first thing he did was dismiss Damian Craig.
Damian along with Steve Adazio, I believe.
Yeah, right. So, but he never coached with Adazio. So the thing when he actually coached with Craig said, okay, all right, what does that tell you? And so then he takes his time. Obviously, this guy, say his name again.
Holman Wiggins.
Obviously, he respects this guy and he says, okay, while everybody on TexAgs is going crazy because they don't have a receivers coach.
As people on TexAgs read tea leaves, as a Saints assistant had followed some Aggie people on Twitter.
Hey, I got my guy. I'm just waiting for his season to be over. I don't know how. Here's the deal. I don't know how good he's going to be, but I saw the praise Nick Saban had given him before. I know. I saw what the Alabama receiver did to A&M this year, right? And I know what the receiving coach was like before. So I feel confident that A&M just got better in that position. Now, how much better? We'll find out. But I like that. But there are so many moves. I love the Tommy Moffitt move. How can you not? Right?
Let's go through this.
Trooper Taylor?
Let's go through the staff here. OC quarterbacks, Colin Klein.
Let me make this.
Yeah.
So Billy Liucci, the omnipotent Billy Liucci, made the point about Colin Klein. He said, look at how people react where he was when he left.
Mm-hmm. It's always a good judge.
And people were upset that Colin Klein was leaving. They were upset at Florida. Jay Bateman was leaving.
You know who else was upset about Colin Klein? Longhorn fans who had seen his offense every year for the past couple of years. So that tells me all I need to know.
I just think that I haven't heard the reaction to Trooper Taylor, but I know he's a heck of a football coach, that old Cuero Gobbler.
Olin is excited when he can say the Cuero Gobblers.
I am, but
so if Trooper Taylor gives you every excuse to say that,
he's been a great, not just good, great recruiting assistant coach for decades. So that was an outstanding hire. So I just look at we'll find out about Ishmael. How's that? Aristide, however he says it. But I know when he was here before, he made a really positive impact on recruiting. Adam Cushing, I'm not going to lie and act like I'm an expert on this guy from Duke.
Yeah.
But I know what the situation was with the previous coach.
It's the same thing you said earlier about Elko's. He's been around this guy. He brought in a guys that he believes can get the job done the way he thinks it needs to be done.
And it wasn't getting done.
Right.
I only need to know one thing about Patrick Doherty.
What's that?
He's a special teams coach, man. I mean, you have one.
Yep.
Go ahead and be successful at it, but at least Elko is addressing a problem. And then, Sean Spencer, I think he's been good since he's been here. And I don't know what the situation was at Florida, but I know he's a very respected and been very productive defensive line coach. In fact, Florida's had good defensive linemen. They've had guys draft pretty high. Defensive line, I don't think, has been their problem.
No.
So I feel good, really good about the job Mike Elko has done in putting together what I think looks like a really, really good coaching staff, an improved coaching staff. Now, all that said, I'm not allowing myself to get excited about anything because it's to the point now. Hey, it's nothing matters until the football season, but at least I'm seeing reasons to think you're going to have a team that's going to be better coached. And what we just talked about earlier, we talked about how close A&M was against Ole Miss and Alabama and Tennessee.
Right.
How close they were. Maybe better coaching turns those close losses into close wins.
Well, you know what hire I like the most?
Tell
this
me.
is different because he's not on the field. I like the hire of Derek Miller, football recruiting general manager.
Okay.
It's very cool to see Elko saying, hey, I'm going to be the head coach. I'm going to hire a DC that can implement my defense. I'm still going to be there every day. I'm going to hire a general manager that I'm going to be there, and I'm going to be there to help him, and he's going to do his thing. But this guy is going to help me manage my roster. And I think in this day and age of college football, what have we talked about this whole show? We talked about the transfer portal.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked about recruiting. That's this guy's thing. This guy's thing is I'm going to make sure we are going after the right guys in the portal.
Yeah. And addressed it. The guy that of all of them that I'm most excited about personally, Tommy Moffitt.
Yeah.
A&M was successful with Jerry Schmidt. And then he leaves, and Jimbo replaces him with, I can't even remember who. Definitely didn't have the resume.
Skins on the wall that Jerry Schmidt had.
Well, all of a sudden A&M, I'm not saying that's the only reason A&M started to struggle, but it's a contributing factor.
It does coincide with that timeline, correct.
So now you bring in a guy that was a strength and conditioning coach for 3 national championship teams at LSU. Mm-hmm. And by the way, did you see the T-Bob Hebert radio here's a former coach, a former player, and he says, hey, we all used to laugh at how soft Texas A&M is.
Yeah.
And I saw Moffitt, and my favorite quote, he said, well, that's not going to be the case anymore. Hell is coming.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bring it on.
Again, it's the same discussion we're having. We're talking about what are other people saying about the hire.
Right.
Every one of those LSU dudes that played for Moffitt that are in the media now, the Jacob Hesters, T-Bob.
They're going, crap.
They got that guy.
Yeah, and I saw somebody react and said, it was maybe a fan, but he said, the idea that A&M now has Tommy Moffitt and an adult at head coach scares the hell out of me.
I think another good hire just out of having fun, Wesley McGriff. Can we call him Crime Dog?
I hope he's as productive in his role as the Crime Dog was. In his. And what's the situation with Tony Girardetti?
I believe if you read Billy Liucci's post on the board, Tony Girardetti is going to round out the staff. We'll confirm that with Billy later.
I love it.
As a second defensive line coach. So the same model we've seen recently. 2 DBs coach, 2 D-line.
I want an Aggie on staff. I mean, a
former A&M football player on staff.
Yes, I do. I just think that's important. I always want somebody that, and a guy from Texas, right? A guy.
You want to talk about recruiting?
Yeah.
Where did Tony Girardetti play his high school football? DeSoto produces some pretty good
There's
football
some good
players, don't they?
Football players at DeSoto. Right now, they got a 6'8", 380-pound junior.
Yeah. And Tony Girardetti, who did he play with at DeSoto OB? Some guy named Von Miller.
Miller, yeah.
Cyrus Gray. It's a pretty good little trio.
so far, I'm applauding everything that Mike Elko's done. I really am. Did they have some in recruiting on signing day? Did they have some disappointments? Of course. You're going to have that. For any time the situation they had, not only did you lose the head coach, but you weren't able to retain Elijah Robinson, though you tried. So you had to expect that. But everything the guy's done so far, he's been so active in rebuilding relationships with high school coaches and bringing in a coaching staff and doing a good job, being so active in the transfer portal. And I thought, considering circumstances, had a good day on signing day, considering circumstances. So on January 3rd, I'm applauding everything. But none of it matters until you win on August 31st and afterwards.
That's right. He's Olin Buchanan. It's the Go Hour presented by the Warehouse at CC Creations. We'll close the hour on the other side. You're listening to TexAgs Radio presented by David Gardner's Jewelers.
Goodbye.
He's Olin Buchanan singing. We're closing out the Go Hour on TexAgs Radio presented by David Gardner's Jewelers. A text from Jason Howe. Crime Dog is the nickname
Oh.
of Wesley McGriff. So
Is that everybody's nickname if your name's McGriff?
all I'll say is I give him my full endorsement.
Hey, like I said, I just hope he's as successful in this role as Crime Dog Fred
Was on the
McGriff
baseball
was
field.
in his role.
OB, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. K Nagley will have you tomorrow for the Go Hour. How about that?
All right, if I must,
Try to keep the train.
I may have to call in sick tomorrow.
Yeah, try to keep the train on the tracks. All right, that'll do it for hour number 1. Billy Liucci up next on TexAgs Radio. 901 TexAgs Radio presented by David Gardner's Jewelers. Dalton Hughes in today for David Nuno as we await Billy Liucci here inside the Rollo Insurance Studio. Mr. Savage, are you back there?
Of course.
Are you? Are you really back there?
Yeah, I'm right here.
Oh, I can hear Brawny,
here. Yeah, Brawny's here.
The loudest man in the world.
OB's back here chopping it up, of course, but and there's Kay behind me, the future host of TexAgs Radio.
Hopefully we can get some more out of them in the back. We haven't gotten much today.
Yeah, no
besides
kidding.
Olin. Olin's delivered. Nick, tell me this. You watched both of the games on Monday.
I did,
guessing.
yeah, every second.
Every second.
Every second.
I can't even say I did.
For better or for worse. It got pretty rough with that Texas-Washington game. I was this close to going to bed, but it got interesting.
It started super late.
Yeah.
I didn't understand that.
Yeah.
All right, whatever. Tell me this, Nick. Which player that you watched on Monday impressed you the most?
Ooh, I'm going to go just because maybe I hadn't gotten a chance to really watch him because I can't say I watched too much Michigan football, but I'm going to go Blake Corum. He looked really good. Obviously had the go-ahead touchdown in overtime against Bama. So I think it's more so that I just didn't have a lot of prior, knowledge of him, or I guess a lot of film, quote unquote, if you want to call it that, watched. But yeah, I'm gonna go Blake Corum. He looked really good.
Interesting. I really like Michael Penix, and I think I've watched a lot of him. He's one of those. You started watching Penix back at Indiana during the COVID season. He played really well. Then he transferred to Washington, played good last year, and this year, man, it's just. He seems like one of those players that he always does what's needed to win the game when it matters most.
Yeah, when you throw for 400-something yards like he did in the game. Lucci's here, by the way. He'll be in a second. But, yeah, when you throw for 400-plus yards in a playoff game, I mean, that's – yeah.
I can hear him talking noise.
He's saying you're floundering to the point where you have to get me on there. So, yeah. But anytime you got – you throw for 400-plus yards, that's really impressive.
Absolutely. All right, it's TexAgs Radio. We are presented by David Gardner's Jewelers here in the Rollo Insurance Studio. Billy Liucci coming up as he is in the back. And then just a reminder, we've got Recruiting Country with Ryan Brauninger at 10 o'clock. We did not cut into any of Brawny's airtime, which should make him happy. 10:30, John Harris. And then closing out the show with Around Aggie Land with Kay Nagley. But joining me in the studio right now, he's brought breakfast. He's brought coffee. He's brought an extra jacket. It's Billy Liucci.
He's Dalton Hughes. Were you floundering?
I mean, I did all right. I had a plan.
You texted me and said, I'm going to flounder.
I mean, that's my joke.
What you didn't know is I was bringing you breakfast on your hard work day, Dalton.
Oh! Thank you.
You're welcome. You can enjoy it during the break, not while you're hosting.
Well, Billy, where do you want to start? I want to guess you would want to start in New Orleans, but if you want to start in Pasadena, we can.
Why would I want to start at either of those places?
When we
you took two guesses,
and they were both wrong. How would you about?
I would like to start with
Wiggins?
the hire. Yeah, the hire that A&M made yesterday that we broke out there.
Good job.
Yeah, and and Aggies today was on it as well. Did what I love about you talking about young people in this business that didn't sprint to put it out there because it could have compromised it. Because contrary to what the Bammers are saying yesterday, that was not a Nick Saban. That was not Saban
saying thank you.
That was I think old Coach Saban was probably caught pretty off guard by that one yesterday. Let's just put it that way. When I say I think, I mean I know. And look, I think that is a home run hire for Texas A&M and Mike Elko. I've seen a lot coming from the Bama side. I think Bama, my suggestion to Bama would be to look deeper into what's gone on with their offense in the last few years and kind of say, do they have a Nick Saban? Well, it's hard. I don't want to use those words because Nick Saban is the best coach in history. They don't have a Nick Saban problem. Does their offense once again have a Nick Saban problem that they had prior to, let's be honest, I don't know if it started with Loxley. I don't know if he was there right before Kiffin or if it was the two of them, but before Kiffin and Sark really took the lid off that thing and took it to a whole nother level and took that dynasty to a whole nother level. with the way they were playing offense. Now I look at Bama and I go, their O-line has not been good for a few years. Their running backs, the talent in that stable, if you look at it 5-10 years ago versus now, it's not even the same time zone. And the same has happened at tight end and receiver. It's across the board offensively. And now you look at their quarterback room, it's the worst it's been since A&M's been in the SEC. It is the worst it's been since A&M's been in the SEC, the room. What A&M went and did was they went and got a wide receivers coach that when you look at his resume and you don't have sour grapes over there, you look at it and you see who he's coached. You want to talk about development. I see guys like John Mechie. When you look at, this year even, what he did, you look at A&M, with what they did at quarterback, you look what they did when they came in here to A&M, to College Station, to Kyle Field, and the numbers they put up at receiver, which was the difference in the game. The difference in the game was the plays their wide receivers made. Some nice throws by Milroe, but you had receivers particularly one, making ridiculous catches in coverage. Who's my man with the Lions right now?
Jameson Williams.
Jameson Williams, I want to say, yeah. Jameson Williams, sure, he was a portal guy. Jameson Williams wasn't half the player he was at Ohio State that he was
at
Bama when he was a Biletnikoff finalist. We saw Williams and Mechie come into Kyle Field and each go off. Mike Elko saw that firsthand. That might have had a little something to do with why Holman Wiggins was on his list. He watched Williams and Mechie come in here and have monster nights at Kyle Field in the game that A&M won. Again, the only reason they were still in that football game. And Bryce Young to Williams and Mechie, certainly coached when he first got there, walked into, I think, the greatest stable of receivers ever, but also he fact-checked me on this, but did Devontae Smith spend his last 2 years under last 1 year or 2 years under Wiggins, but he coached a Biletnikoff winner, Heisman Trophy winner, 3 All-Americans, and has a reputation as a hell of a recruiter right up until today when he's ranked as, I believe, the number 2 recruiter in the country, 2 or 4, I think number 2 in the entire country for the class he just that Bama just signed. So
Devonta Smith spent his last 2 seasons under Wiggins at
and
Alabama.
his last one was arguably the greatest season by a receiver ever.
117 catches, 1,856 yards.
There's development.
23 touchdowns.
And there's development right there, by the way, because I believe Devontae Smith was also looked at as a corner, kind of an athlete coming in. So he spent 1 year, and then Wiggins came in and had him the last 2, the last of which obviously historic with him winning the Heisman. I think he's the first receiver to win it since when? Was it since Tim Brown? Or you don't have to look that up. It was years and years since a receiver had won a Heisman. And I mentioned the recruiting, right? And I've got him watch some videos of him. If you can carry a co-OC title, I believe. You watch videos, watch him talk, listen to him talk, watch his videos. I think he's a riser in the profession. And Alabama fans that are so quick to say, well, our offense hasn't been good. So, I mean, I hope they're saying that about every position. And by the way, I don't think their offense is bad. It had some games where it was But rather you look at situations and you look at things like, why would Elijah Robinson leave A&M for Syracuse? Well, he's going up to be a DC. Why does a coach leave a place for a perceived lateral move? Well, maybe that had to do a little bit. Now, I'm speaking without knowing the truth here, but I'm saying maybe that had a little bit to do with Tommy Rees. Bill O'Brien leaves. You have a guy that had been there at the time 4 years. You bring in Tommy Rees, very inexperienced, make him the OC.
Maybe he felt like he'd been capped at Alabama.
Yeah, maybe Holman Wiggins. I don't think that's a maybe. I from what I understand, it's a definite. He's looking to rise up the profession, be a coordinator, be a head coach, call play. So he probably saw this as an opportunity to come in here and maybe take that next step, or maybe he felt like that wasn't going to be the case in Tuscaloosa. So there's a lot of reasons. none of which really matter other than to say that I think two things. You have a hungry young coach coming in, and you have a head coach in Mike Elko that saw an opening, found a way to close on an elite position coach. He found a way to close on a guy that was at a program that wins at the highest level, that obviously not just Elko, but everybody else in this sport respects that program and what they produce. You look at how coaches that have left there have thrived, particularly on the offensive side of the ball lately. And I think the closing ability there of Elko is what's really impressive. I've seen and heard, and sometimes the listeners and subscribers have too, names that A&M has targeted that get raises and fall off the board. These names that either when I hear them, I go, man, I hope they can get that guy, but I don't think they will. Or when they get out publicly, fans get all excited only to be let down. It's hard to hire coaches away from places like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I watched Jimbo win some, lose some on that front. If you knew, lost a lot more than he won. In terms of the big names,
right,
that they targeted early. And you look at the hires kind of post that initial staff, and it kind of did this, right?
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean they were bad hires, but I know the names of the guys that they were kind of looking at and hopeful of hiring. Holman Wiggins is a guy that'll be at the tip top of that list.
Right.
Colin Klein was at the tip top of that list. I love what they're doing offensively. He knew what he wanted in his O-line coach, and Cushing checked those boxes for him. He knew what he wanted at running backs coach. Trooper Taylor, I heard Olin talking, his history in the state, all of those things. So this offensive staff, I think, is really damn good. And that's exciting when you're talking about a defensive-minded head coach.
Absolutely. Speaking of defensive, we haven't had you on radio because on New Year's Eve that morning, you put out there that A&M is adding veteran defensive backs coach Wesley McGriff to the staff. Crime Dog, what are your thoughts on him?
I think that was one. I've talked to some people. Another guy with strong Texas ties. That's one of Howell's longtime buddies. He's just done such a good job recruiting the DFW area over the years, which you guys are talking about Tony Giardetti. A&M has had virtually no presence in the Dallas-Fort Worth area of late, and that's not only kind of embarrassing, that's a problem. That's a problem with all that town. Go look where all the state titles are coming from. Go look around college football and what guys from a lot of those schools have been doing. McGriff, Trooper Taylor, Tony Giardetti, strong ties in DFW with those two coaches over years and years and years of recruiting and coaching. I think they were looking for a veteran presence, Dalton, in the back end to not only coach those guys, the young players on the A&M roster, not only in terms of technique, and obviously Elko, when he was a D coordinator, worked with the safeties. So, he really values that. I think he wanted a veteran back there, and he also wanted a guy that had been throughout the SEC coaching. He'd been at, I believe, was it Tennessee too? But Ole Miss for sure, Auburn for sure. Obviously coached down there. I believe McGriff was at Miami as well. So he's got ties in the South. And he wanted a guy that's won those battles, Dalton, and gotten quality DBs and found the young, undeveloped, raw DBs that you can find throughout the SEC footprint. And he wanted a guy with that type of career experience. But also, when you go to battle, if you think of A&M's defensive backs coaches since they've been in the SEC, right? I think for like 1 year, they had a veteran. I think 1 year they went and had like Ron Cooper. That was kind of the death rattle for Sumlin and Chavis and them. It was at the very end.
Mm-hmm.
They have had very young DBs coaches. When you think of rushing, when you think of Mo Linguist, BGA this past season was his first year as a coach. You go back, even, Terry Joseph just coached in the playoff the other night. When Terry Joseph was at A&M, he was very young, very raw coach. So since they've been in the league, Marcel Yates was young and inexperienced. So I love the fact that I'm not saying they needed to go get experience at the sake of that youthful energy back there and connecting, but they've got the combination now in Ish and Wesley McGriff. So I like that combo there.
Defensive side locked out. Jay Bateman is your defensive coordinator, linebacks coach. Sean Spencer and Tony Giardetti, defensive line. Ish and Wesley McGriff coaching the defensive backs. And obviously, Mike Elko will have a heavy hand, I would think, back there as well.
No question. But, I mentioned it many times even before the Bateman hire. He wanted to get a guy in there that was pretty like-minded in terms of he knew how he was going to call a game. He knew what his defensive philosophy was. He knew how he thought. And I think it was that's what led him to Bateman. And also, by the way, Bateman was a really good recruiter at Florida. So one thing the Florida fans could not stop saying. Bateman, the experience of guys like McGriff and Trooper Taylor and their reputations as recruiters, Holman Wiggins now, Ish. Tony Giardetti has done a tremendous job since Elko's gotten here. He's also done a tremendous job in helping to keep that roster together. And they lost some guys, but man, if you look in the big picture of what they lost after a coaching transition, and it was some, I don't know how they got in the position where where Elijah Robinson mattered so much. That's an indictment on what was going on across the street there. That it's a compliment to Elijah. It's an indictment on the program that a position coach can carry so much weight and swing in your locker room within your program. Because where was that with the head coach? Where was that with the coordinators? We're a position coach and that many guys to be like that whole foundation to shake the way it did when he took a job that he should have taken probably for him, Syracuse. Time will tell if it was the right thing, but I'm not going to tell a guy don't go become a DC. I will tell a guy not to bring Nick Williams for Nick Williams not to be in the hospitality suite at the bowl game. I will say don't go in-house with Don McKinley until after. Those things I feel strongly about. But taking that Syracuse job, I'm not going to tell someone not to do something that they're passionate about. And he might end up being a tremendous D coordinator. I think he'll be a tremendous head coach. But for that much outside of the D-line room to hinge on a position coach tells you how shaky that whole operation was there down the stretch. And it's further proof that they made the right call at the right time. But again, Elko had to weather that, and Tony Giardetti was a big part of helping that out. And again, the portal closed last night. Now, there are a couple guys that I'm going to check and make sure didn't go in. I don't believe they did. And there's also a spring portal window that then more than now is going to be a work both ways thing.
Yeah.
So far, all we've really seen have been guys going out. Elko and them have gotten some nice pieces quietly. Not any big names yet, but some really nice fits. With what they have coming in this weekend, and Brauninger will talk about it here shortly, that is going to change the balance there. It's going to tip the scales a little bit in terms of what's gone out versus what's coming in.
9:20 on TexAgs Radio, presented by David Gardner's Jewelers. More with Billy Liucci on the other side of the break. You're listening to TexAgs Radio on The Zone. 924 TexAgs Radio, presented by David Gardner's Jewelers. We are inside the Rollo Insurance Studio with TexAgs co-owner and executive editor Billy Liucci. I'm Dalton Hughes, in for David Nuno this morning.
Huey.
Lucci?
Hey, by the way, before you go into whatever you had planned for this segment, the other thing,
let's just throw the plans out because it's the second segment in a row. Just whatever you want to do.
Exactly.
You own the company.
Exactly. Let's, Holman Wiggins, too. Remember, we're still in portal season. So anybody that went in the portal at wide receiver in the last 24 hours, or anybody that went in, that's gone in since yesterday afternoon that we don't know about yet, I'm not hinting that there is anybody. I don't know that there is, but I'm saying anybody that goes in the spring. This was a guy that was coaching wide receivers at Alabama, Dalton. So there are a lot of receivers out there throughout the SEC, from veterans to recruits, that were heavily recruited by Holman Wiggins, that he's got ties to, and that he still probably has some sort of connection to, and obviously in Tuscaloosa, but I'm talking about really beyond. I'm not talking about the guys with the Tide, although you've seen Jeff Banks and Sarkisian and Flood do that on the way out of Tuscaloosa, where all of a sudden magically they had a few Bama guys there. But I'm talking about more throughout the SEC, the ACC, nationally, guys that Holman Wiggins certainly recruited to Alabama, like high-end, high-talent, highly coveted receivers. So that is still a spot where the Aggies need help via the portal, in my opinion. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if this hire directly resulted in a portal edition or two, that you will be able to trace back a connection there with Wiggins through either their recruitment or any time spent in T-Town. So I mean that's going to happen right away. That might be spring portal period, but I do think there's that element, and there's also the element of, I don't suspect that the Aggies will go back in on Evan Stewart. You never say never, Denver Harris, but I don't suspect that'll happen. I do think that's going to be a massive boost to Texas A&M's recruiting efforts at the position. And I think any unsigned kids in 24 at receiver, and I certainly think looking ahead to 25 and the early recruiting that's going to go on, I think that's going to be a position where you see the Aggies, because of Wiggins and Colin Klein. And by the way, I don't think we've talked about, how old's Colin Klein? Like 30? He's like Johnny's age, 31. Well, I guess he's a couple years older. Johnny was a freshman when he won it, and 32 years old. Between those two guys, I think you're going to see a lot of excitement from young wide receivers that they recruit to come into this offense. I think that was those were a pair. It was like back-to-back home run hires by Elko and that staff offensively. So they were back-to-back, right? Because the rest of the guys were from Duke.
Mm-hmm.
Correct? O-line, running back, tight end, / special teams. And, yeah, so back-to-back home run hires on offense by Elko. And I think that receivers going to be lining up to come check out what's going on over here.
And then speaking of what you just said, Alabama does have a 5-star receiver commit, Ryan Williams, who is committed and not signed. So
yeah, that would
is
be
a name. Again, who knows? But that's a name that's
most people.
out there.
They were already worried about him going to Auburn and Cam Coleman getting him, which is what worries me about. You know, if Auburn goes out and gets the Liberty quarterback,
Caden Salter.
Salter. I always want to say Siter, like I always misread that with my eyes. Is that an L or an I? Caden Salter out of Cedar Hill to go with those receivers, and Auburn's obviously on the A&M schedule. But yeah, a lot of people were worried about in Tuscaloosa. Were worried about him ending up at Auburn anyway. But who knows? Maybe you hit them with a little hit Hugh Freeze with a little gut shot after. They preyed on the Aggies when during the Jimbo transition, so we'll see.
It'll be interesting to see. Billy, sticking with portal, let's stay there.
Okay.
Obviously, you still have the window for entering is closed here in this cycle.
Mm-hmm.
You'll have another one open after spring football. But if I big picture, what are the biggest positions of need for A&M out of the portal before, the summer, hit summer and then fall camp, and then obviously the first game against Notre Dame, August 31st?
I'd say almost everywhere. I mean, wide receiver, I mentioned. I think they've done a good job of adding a couple. La Tech, Old Dominion. I still think they need at least one more. Look at the number. Well, who are the scholarship receivers on campus today? It's Noah, Moose, Jade, and Micah Tees. Is that it?
I believe so.
I think so. That doesn't cut it. And you had 2 transfers here at 6. I think they need 1 or 2, probably 2 more through the portal if you can get them, but at least 1. I think linebacker, there's no question about it that they need to go out and try to grab, I would say. And look, J.D. Davis didn't do anything at A&M. I'm rooting for that kid. I liked him a lot. As a just from meeting him and stuff, but he didn't do anything last year. He had an injury early and never got back on the field really. But that was depth, and maybe it was this year he was going to contribute a little. Who knew? But point being, what do you have at linebacker that's proven?
Torian York.
That's it, right?
Yeah.
And you like the young guys and
Martrell Harris.
Damian Sanford, Martrell Harris, I think. But those guys have proven, Chance Johnson, those guys have proven nothing yet. They haven't played at all to really show anything. Martrell a little bit, but you can't go into a season. Any of those 3 guys, and they're excited about those 2 true freshmen last year, any of them can develop and end up being really good. They could be All-Americans. But they haven't done anything enough yet for you to say, okay, I'm good with them starting in the SEC next year. You got to go find guys to start in the SEC next year. And they went up to Youngstown State, found a guy that's 6'3", almost 240, and runs sub 4.6. That's a nice start. But I think you need to go out and grab a couple more linebackers in the portal. I don't even need to go into what I think they need to do at corner. I love the addition of Will Lee, but I think they need to add at least 2 more defensive backs, and if not 3. I think they need to add 2 or probably 3 more DBs in the portal, and if all 3 were corners, I wouldn't complain about it. So, and then finally, maybe tight end as well. If you look at it, you lose Max Wright, you lose Johnson, Jake Johnson, who he wasn't a difference maker this year, but he made some important plays in the passing game. You went and got a guy that can block out of Purdue, which I think was significant and important. They haven't had much of that around here at the position. You'll get Donovan Green back. Theo's still, I think, a developmental guy, and I could certainly see them going out. I believe they're bringing one in this weekend. I thought it was this weekend. But you could certainly see them go out and try to get another tight end if possible. It was the guy from, I don't see him on this list. I told Bronny about him, but I don't see him on his list.
Well, can I say it?
I think they're looking at a tight end. Let's put it that way. Maybe we don't want to say because there are other teams that are recruiting these guys.
Secret injure. He told us to keep it secret.
Because I told him to tell you to keep it. Let's be real clear about this guy.
What's this guy's deal?
So tight end position, I think if they could find the right guy, they'd add him. Running back, you going to go into a season with 3 tailbacks?
No.
You
got to add one.
You'd be crazy to do that. So running back, and then look at what they lost on. What have they lost on the D-line? McKinley Jackson, Fadil Diggs, and Walter Nolan, at the top, the starters. Then you lost Isaiah Rakes, his depth. White tore his ACL mid-season, so I don't think he's an option. Maybe he can get back. So you lose those 4 right off the rip. What are you replacing them with?
Yeah.
You have 3. You signed, I think, 3 true freshmen D linemen are in the early going, and that's nice. But you got to backfill some depth in there. And I obviously, if they could end up getting Nick Scorton, that changes the whole
complexion.
Look, there was a lot of work done. I mentioned Tony, Elko, Bateman coming in. Obviously, Spencer Sanders coming in here. I'm saying Spencer Sanders, Sean Spencer. Got to stop that because Spencer Sanders was not a good quarterback certainly not in the SEC. Maybe A&M would have rather him played in that bowl game.
Yeah.
Than Bowman. I mean, Bowman just throwing up jump balls again. Why you need to go get better corners
again? What did I tell you?
And again, Javon Thomas and Bravion Rogers and McCall, who went in that game, those guys could end up being great cornerbacks at A&M. But with what you've seen on tape in limited action and them having so little experience, it's not a formula for success to go into a season. Like Bravion Rogers might beat out everyone you bring in and put in front of him, and he might hit that curve, and Ish might tap into that. Those two guys, Rogers and Thomas, are insanely talented athletes. They are gifted. Different coach, different scheme, whole thing might look different. You can't bank on that. So, and on the D line, but if you could have Nick, Shamar Stewart, Shamar Turner, who I still think, and again, I'm not going to go and state definitively that he's coming back. I still feel good about that in terms of NFL or stay. And then DJ Hicks, who looked so good in that bowl game, and Gabe Brownlow-Dindy, and don't forget you've got a veteran in Albert Regis that's going to be a grown man next year. Malik Silla going into year 3. And what I think you actually need to add more in the portal too, because you need to add some veteran depth up front as well. I could see them adding another big guy on the inside. I could see them adding even another end if they see the need. So portal, they're going to go crazy.
Yeah,
they should. They need to, and I think they will. I think they're going to add a lot in the portal. I think we need to sit back, wait until the dust all settles, and go, this is what you brought in. This is what you lost. How do we feel about this football team?
Look at the scales after it's done.
I think they could add, and I'm just making up a number here, they could add 10 more guys. They could add 10, couple here, couple there. That number gets up to 10 or 12 pretty quickly. That's like half a recruiting class with veteran play. Actually, I say that they could add 8 to 10 more in addition to what they've already added. So you're going to look at that portal class coming in, and I think you're going to feel a lot better about it than what left.
Absolutely. TexAgs.com/subscribe for the latest news. Visitor list for the transfers is out currently on the site. Bronny Howler all over it with Billy Liucci leading the charge. You're listening to TexAgs Radio presented by David Gardner's Jewelers. On the other side, we'll talk about the national semifinals. Texas loses. Alabama loses. We'll do that with Billy Liucci and more on the other side. You're listening to TexAgs Radio on the Zone. Can't flounder if we haven't come back yet. 942 TexAgs Radio.
Nick came
presented
running
by,
out there. Bronny's yapping. You're floundering.
Well, I was listening to Panama, waiting on you. So
we had a guy in high school named Panama.
All right, Panama Red.
Ronaldo. I believe the name may be, I believe it was, I know it was Ronaldo Rose, a.k.a. Panama.
Panama Red.
You know why they called him Panama?
Why?
He was from Panama.
Boy.
Some of the nicknames aren't creative. I didn't come up with that one. I probably would have come up with something better.
I mean, the best nickname you've ever told me is your cousin, Joey Bag of Donuts.
I don't have a cousin, Joey Bag of Donuts. Nobody, that's not even true. I've never said that because it's not a thing.
No.
I don't. I swear to God, I don't. That's what Hunter uses in every business meeting I've ever sat in with him, whether it's TexAgs or whatever. When I always it's almost like if you had like a siren to go off, he'll bring his friend Joe Bag of Donuts somehow for 25 years into every meeting he's ever got.
Maybe that's where.
Or if you get into a deep conversation about, like, if he wants to talk to you about recruiting or coaching or college football or NFL, he's like, I can have Joe Bag of Donuts in here. And every single, I don't know if in freshman accounting or something, they had a character named Joe Bag of Donut, but he's never let it go. So the first time I sit down with him and he doesn't bring up Joe Bag of Donuts,
he'll call me and tell me.
And, it's like got an Italian sound. Yeah, Joe Bag of Donut. Hunter says it in the most Belleville country way imaginable. I bring in Joe Bag of Donuts in here and tell you. So, yeah.
The Belleville Brahma Hunter Goodwin.
Belleville, they played for a state title. They got a D lineman next year. Bronny's been talking about
for a little
bit.
But
he's a baller, so we'll see.
You talk about that. We just missed it, that game, by the way. We were one win away from a
Glen Rose
final.
I texted Dan about it. He was like, let's go. Speaking of your Cowboys, my God. How ridiculous was that?
It was some
And then what happened with the Eagles? I mean, you guys are starting to really look like the Longhorns and Rangers now. Just luck.
Here's the thing.
I say that. Even though they beat the Astros, I didn't hate the Rangers. I could not bring myself to hate, and that's a wrong thing for an Astros fan to say. I rooted for the Astros. I wanted them to win. I was at Game 7. That sucked. I was also at Game 1. That was incredible. I couldn't root against the Rangers. And I like Dak, and CD's outstanding, and he's kind of from right there in my backyard. Mm-hmm. Went to Foster, literally right there in Kempner's backyard. But Micah Parsons, dominant player. Got some LT to him there. They're not, the Cowboys aren't a hateable group of players, in my opinion. Yeah, Donovan Wilson making big plays. They're not a hateable group of players. It's hard for me to hate them, but I'm rooting against them like crazy. I love the fact that Jimmy went in. That was awesome. Long overdue. Aikman. Love Troy.
Your boy.
Yeah. I mean, met him once. So, I don't know, man. I'm in a weird place with rooting against the Cowboys, but there's one team in their way that makes me have to root against them, and that's the team that they were very lucky and gifted a victory over on Saturday night. Gifted victory over.
Shouldn't have won.
No.
Bad officiating.
And they're going to get the home field throughout the playoff, or not throughout, home field
except for the championship
until they have to go to San Fran because of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a classic Longhorn/Dallas maneuver. Speaking of,
I was going to say the luck side of that too is it is not luck. It's setting up a very cool thing opening weekend, as we talked about last night at dinner. Stafford's return to Detroit for a playoff game possibility.
I may have to go up for that one. First playoff game in Detroit in X amount of time. We talked about it. I might do that. Now, let me ask you this, because I haven't dug deep enough into it.
Riddle me it.
Would that set up a second-round rematch in Dallas?
It depends. I'm not going to lie.
Niners 1, Cowboys 2, Lions 3, Eagles 4. 2-3, right? Or does the NFL playoff screwy?
I don't think the NFL playoffs is screwy. It's easier. I still don't understand how it all works when they went to the 7 teams per conference.
Anyway, common sense, and it could not. Common sense would tell you that could be setting that up.
We should ask Richard Zane what happened the last time the Lions played a playoff game in Dallas.
The Lions won, right?
No, they didn't.
They didn't?
No.
What was the game that the Lions did win against the Cowboys where there was a shaky officiating call or something?
It was that one. No, it was the Lions lost.
Okay. How did they lose?
It was more questionable officiating on I don't want to say it was like an ineligible thing. Richard will be able to tell you. They lost. It was some screwy officiating in Dallas.
Oh, and the Cowboys won.
Yes.
Oh, I know that's what I was talking about, but I thought the Lions got the benefit. I guess Stafford never won a playoff game there, right? Was that the only one he played in?
I don't know if that was the only one he played in, but I definitely remember them losing that
Okay, now, with that said, we almost saw the luckiest Longhorn break in the history of lucky Longhorn breaks. They almost advanced to the national title game, and who knows, maybe would have won it. Michigan certainly looks like the better team. Hell, Washington looked like the much better team. But what happened there with that injury on third down to stop that clock? I'm watching that game, and the whole time they're talking about how much in control Washington is, and they certainly were, but it was a 13-point game with almost a whole quarter to go. And I'm going, Worthy, A.D. Mitchell, Whittington, Sanders, they're one play away from being, in the red zone to score to cut it to 6. And then not 7, but 6. They're in position to steal this game.
Yeah.
And when Washington went down and they threw it on third down, everybody's on DeBoer about that. I don't think that was awful because a touchdown puts you up 13. It makes it almost impossible for Texas. But they threw it away. Texas didn't have to burn that one more time out. That came back to almost haunt the Huskies. But it wouldn't have had the guy not gotten hurt. Texas goes down. Damn, were those second and third down stops huge. Don't forget, they stopped him on 2nd and 4 inside the 10. They stopped him on 3rd and 4. And then they had to stop him 4 downs. So down the stretch, with all those weapons on offense and Sark squatting down like he's taking a dump out in the field, they call it the Matrix. I call it, I don't know what I call it, but they think it's some kind of amazing thing that he's squatting down on the field. They've somehow convinced, well, man, don't let this guy squat down and start calling plays. It's over.
Well,
it's the dumbest thing I've ever seen, for them to glorify that. I don't care if he's doing jumping jacks, squatting down, laying down, standing up. Dude's a good play caller. But I've always said I think he's a little overhyped. I think he runs a terrific offensive scheme, but there are games where they struggle. They should have grossly overmatched that Husky offense. They produced really 14 points until about midway through the fourth quarter. And he had 6 plays inside the 12-yard line at the end of that game that essentially could have won it because those first 2, you end up kicking a field goal the second time down and you win the game if you score. 6 plays down there with Mitchell, Sanders, Whittington, Worthy, Ewers, Baxter, Blue, and you couldn't get it done.
Yeah.
That offensive line and Banks, you couldn't score. That Huskies defensive backfield was riddled all year. They were like 120 against the pass. None of those receivers had a really good game. Whittington had 1 long catch. Worthy had 1 long catch. Mitchell had the short touchdown. Those guys didn't do much of anything.
Mm-hmm.
Washington, the guy that walks out of there as the offensive guru is Grubb. It's Ryan Grubb.
Yeah.
They took out Sweat and Murphy out of that game. They did nothing statistically. They ran the ball on Texas with some success, and they went over the top and attacked that secondary. And Grubb was the one that was in his bag.
Absolutely.
Grubb was the one. So you walk out of there, and Michael Penix is ridiculous. We said that early in the year. I go back to watching him beat Penn State while he's at Indiana, and he's gotten so much better since then, a credit to them. But that dude was terrific. Washington was clearly the better football team against Texas, by the way, for the second year in a row.
Absolutely. That even got Billy a front page piece on the sports of the Dallas Morning News today. Did you see that?
No, what?
Kevin Sherrington quoted your tweet talking about the Longhorns.
What did I say?
About, what was it? Bitter end of a season that Sugar Bowl. Billy Liucci, chief of TexAgs, congratulated the Longhorns on a hell of a season and incredible fight.
I thought they did, like, getting realistic here, like, I did not. Everybody knows I didn't want them to win because I also didn't think they should have. They should have been in the playoff, but it took a lot of wildness for them to get. And every year, that third or fourth team might get some wildness.
We got to go.
Where are we going?
We got to take a break, and we'll do a short segment on the other side. You can take Bronny's time. It's not important.
We will.
TexAgs
we'll
Radio presented by David Gardner's Jewelers.
Pontoons.
Well, the pontoon's coming in, as Billy Liucci just said. 9:56.
I was wondering.
Closing out hour number 2. Does that mean you're sticking around?
Yeah, we're going to talk a little of this, little of that.
That means he's going to spend half of the next segment crying about his airtime being taken.
Well, he won't. Just let him. Just tell him he can.
All right. Hour number 3, recruiting country next on the other side. TexAgs
Hot air
Radio.
time, by the way.
David Gardner's Jewelers. 10:40 or 10 o'clock. Sorry. TexAgs Radio presented by David Gardner's Jewelers inside the Rollo Insurance Studio, and it's time for Recruiting Country presented by Caprock Health System, a faster patient-centered revolution in care with 2 ERs in Bryan College Station, the original 24-hour ER in South College Station on William D. Fitch, and the full-service hospital with an ER in Bryan on Briarcrest.
Ronnie, what'd you think of the Rose Bowl? Speaking of recruiting.
So stupid.
Just shut up and get to work.
I made the whole show around not cutting into your airtime because I know that's been a big point of contention with you.
That, and then we have to sit on the same side. So, given the stature of me and myself,
you could have sat there.
No. You would have freaked out. And Nick had clearly, y'all had talked about this because that microphone's down. So Nick has colluded with you on this.
He just said out of chair. He didn't say where.
We have not talked about it.
This is Nick's fault.
Yeah. Blame it on Nick.
Bronny, I just wanted to talk a little ball with you, buddy.
Okay.
Talk
ball.
Let's talk about your Texans.
Listen, this is the most – I was telling Richard in the lobby, this is the most excited I've been for a Texans game since the Matt Schaub era.
Probably.
And win and you're in, and then if you get a little luck, you may win the division and get a home playoff game. That's pretty incredible in year one for D'Amico Ryans.
It is pretty incredible in year one for Ryan and Stroud, right? Like that's and they did it with him being banged up for a couple weeks. They lost a couple of them, but they've hung in. Without him getting hurt, they might have. They'd already be in. They probably would host up.
They had a bad loss in the middle of the year at home that was like, man, you've let that one get away, and this thing could come down to a one-game decision in the division, and that's what happened. But Gerard Johnson on staff, Bobby Slowick, I think this is his first offensive coordinator job, correct?
Yeah.
They've got a really exciting young nucleus.
Yeah, absolutely.
He doesn't care.
No.
He doesn't care.
No.
I think
they just want his word when Jerry Jones' next Botox appointment is.
Oh, jeez.
I think it's cool what the Texans are doing. I think it's great that they beat the Titans twice this year, especially after the Love You Blue fiasco that they pulled.
That was pretty
I'm
good.
on their side for that.
Yes.
That's very, very
good. Thank you, Dalton. Thank you.
That's what needed to happen. That's the way football goes. You needed to repay the football gods and say no. Now recruiting.
We're talking. The reason we're
talking
here
ball.
Is to talk ball.
Talk ball, Dalton.
What were you more impressed with this past weekend? Michigan's ability to just outlast Bama, because that's kind of what that was, or Michael Penix, and let's just say that Washington Huskies team, but especially Penix and what he did. I thought he was incredible.
It's Penix without question, because I watched the entirety of the Bama-Michigan game and went, it felt clunky.
Yeah.
And both teams didn't play a great brand of football, and there were runs made by, I thought Michigan outplayed Bama by a million miles in the first half, and I thought that flipped in the second half. And it just came down to who was going to kind of clean it up there at the end and win the game. Texas and Washington, watching Michael Penix throw the football was incredible. I can't sitting there watching him make throw after throw in really tight windows in different trajectories and different parts of the field, and you're going, who does this?
He to me, and I watched him. I watched him last year against Texas, and I watched him in Indiana. Maybe it was just in that Penn State game when they beat him. I think it was early in the COVID season.
It was one of their first or second games, I think.
But I've always been impressed with him. And watching him last year against Texas, early in that game, I was like, dude, this dude's really good. And last year he's on a whole nother level than Quinn Ewers. It's understandable Ewers was at the end of his freshman season. But watching them the other night, him and Ewers looked like they weren't even playing the same position. And I didn't think Ewers was terrible. But Penix was ridiculously good. That was as good outside of Joe Burrow. That's as good as I've seen a quarterback play in that playoff/championship setting.
Well, in the end of that game, and we talked about it on the phone, they've got to do something about that, because that is a glitch or a little hole in the rules there with what happened with the injury. Like, that clock should start running once it's set for play. Yeah, that clock should start running again. Yeah. So, and look,
they almost lost
Kalen
that
DeBoer
game
can't
on that.
control that, right? But he can't control throwing the football in the drive before when
Yeah.
they kicked the field goal. That's another 40, 50 seconds.
Yeah.
Obviously,
they would have had to call timeout, and you get that back on the
Right.
back end if you need it.
And then the bonehead play by the deep snapper for the kick catch interference. Like, it was all, we're sitting there watching it going, Texas they're gonna pull this off. And it was weird because when Sark got down inside the 20, I don't know what he like.
The first
play
down
calling
call,
was bizarre.
The swing pass, I'm guessing they were trying to hit something up the seam, but
Yeah, I think Ewers just came off of whatever they were trying to do
Really
quickly.
quick.
Which, look, had he not,
Maybe
Blue
you
might
don't
get
get that
tackled
last
in
play.
bounds. That game's over. So look, at the end of the day, the play calls either work or they don't. Michigan had a tremendous play call down there with the game on the line in regulation. Where it wasn't the back. That was a receiver comes wide open.
Yeah.
Like
Roman Wilson.
You've seen. I'm telling you guys, like Sark, they probably need to have a discussion of like. I don't think they will, but it'll come to a point where you're going head coach, play caller. I think he's an elite play caller, but I think he's also head coaching, and I think at some point along the way that becomes an issue. I don't think he'd ever give it up either. Some point along the way that becomes an issue, and down there with a potential national championship on the line against a defense that's pretty porous, they couldn't get it in. And we were talking not just on 4 snaps down there. There was 2 on the previous drive too. 6 snaps down there. I think on those 6 snaps they got 0 yards. They were 1 for 6 passing for -1 yard.
And we were talking about Longhorn luck earlier. I was having flashbacks when Ewers threw that ball out of bounds on the 3rd down. About the whole the Nebraska Big 12 championship
the 1
game.
second,
Like, I've only thrown it with a higher arc, maybe.
And his
doesn't
knee
get the
was
second
almost
arc.
down too. But did the guy on that sidelines catch
it on purpose?
Now here's my question. Not my question. My observation was Washington was clearly the better football team. They went for it on 4th down in the first half when they probably shouldn't have, and they could have got a field goal. The fumbled punt was massive. And then twice they had to settle for field goals down there. That game. And Penix missed the one pass he missed, it felt like the whole game, was that deep shot where he was from me to you behind the corner. That's a walk-in touchdown. It ended up being PI, but they had to kick a field goal to go up 13 instead of the touchdown to put them up 17 that would have ended the game.
I'm super interested to see what the roster turnover at Texas is going to look like. Obviously, Xavier Worthy has declared for the NFL draft, but it's more relevant now than it ever has been for us to start looking at that because we play them next year.
When there's a transfer portal and there's a window that's still open for those teams that played in those.
What a segue. This guy's a pro.
Yeah. Well, kind of, because I still want to talk about
We talked about this last night.
But those guys, that window's open for the teams that were in the playoffs and the teams that played bowl games. So Texas will have some guys go in. Texas has some positions. This hasn't been the case a lot lately. They have some positions where they're noticeably better than A&M at. And A&M's got some positions they're still better than Texas at as well. But there's a couple spots where depth guys at Texas or young guys that don't think they've gotten their chance yet that are, poachable, let's say, to other teams around the country, they're going to have some guys go in the portal that I bet A&M will at least look at and go, oh, that's interesting. Should we pursue that? So there might be 1 or 2. And again, like you said, we were talking earlier about Bama and Holman Wiggins. There's going to be some guys from the Tide that do it as well. A lot of those teams that played, LSU, you've seen they had a big one go in.
Jalen Brown went in. He's a kid that A&M recruited out of high school.
Receiver.
Yep.
And then Hurd, the O-lineman, right?
Zalen's Hurd,
a 5-star. That one kind of shook them a little bit, hit them hard. So be an interesting thing to watch in the next couple of days there. I'll turn it over to you. I do want to talk more maybe later this week, maybe Friday if I come on. I want to talk more about Bama. Because there's been a lot said about Bama and wide receivers from the Bama fans yet since last night.
There was a report that came out this morning, and I'm guessing that Feinbaum talked to somebody close to Saban, indicating he's maybe on his last legs. Like he's getting tired of the portal. He doesn't like NIL. And
How could you?
Right, I know. And that's, that's an argument that every college coach can make, but a guy that's how old now? And he's done all he has. Like,
he's got his Mercedes dealerships.
My question is, does he want to come back from one more run with Milroe? Not that Milroe was great, but he's had moments of flashes of brilliance. I look at Bama, and there was a lot of talk yesterday because of them talking about Wiggins leaving, and they're like, oh, well, we hadn't been happy with our receivers. Or what have you been happy with on that side of the ball? Your O-line in the last 3 years against A&M has gotten their collective asses whipped. Your center couldn't snap the ball, or you win the Rose Bowl probably. And I give all the credit in the world to Bama and what they do, but this has been a horrible stretch of O-line play for them. Their running backs, I'll just say, go look at the room 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Look at the room today. Mm-hmm. Look at the quarterback room. And then receiver as well. Like, something's going on where offensively they are coming back to the pack a lot faster than even they are on defense.
I think the big one was tight end, too. You said it earlier, and I started thinking about it. You think about all the guys that used to be in that tight end room that make a play. Cameron Latu, Cameron Bray.
Those guys were down from the O.J. Howards of the world.
Well, yeah, the kid that they were running out there 45 the other night was like a transfer from, I know, they kept talking about him on the McAfee broadcast, Oots or whatever, and he's like a 6'4", like, he's not a household name. Like, Bama's tight ends and skill players used to be like, you knew every one of them.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's going to be interesting to follow. Are you sticking around?
Center looked like Dalton out there snapping the ball.
It's another thing I don't get. They were snapping the old way, and he didn't change. Like, we know that dead snap that they call it is a way more accurate and easier to handle snap now. Like, some of these old school guys, Jason Kelsey snaps the old way. Mm-hmm. He's been doing it for how long?
20, 30
But if
years.
you have an issues, like, there's a simple solution to try to fix it. And this kid's had the same issue all year. There are a lot of people talked about his snap issues throughout the season. So, like, why don't you change?
Coaches can get weird sometimes.
Yeah.
And I've talked to head coaches at the college and NFL level where when it's not them that are screwing up, you can joke around about it. When it's him screwing up, me and you can joke about it. When it's him, we're like, but when it's you kind of, I'm not going to bring that up just yet.
Yeah.
But it's funny. They all watch and go, what the hell was Bronny doing there? I don't know. He's crazy. And then a week later, it's them. So it's got to be a lot more like, there's got to be something else to it because these guys are so smart, and you can sit there and see it, and somebody on a message board can see it, and you tell me Nick Saban can't?
Yeah.
I think they get so busy and caught up, and I'm expecting my O-line coach is going to handle that. Surely that won't. But at what point, do you step in and go, hey, you're going to get your ass fired if that's not fixed, and you're not going to play anymore until it's fixed.
Right.
I don't know. It's wild because it did just cost them.
I can stay for 2 more segments if he's leaving.
I got a guess at 10:30, but if you need to dip out.
I'm dipping out, but I think this is putting Dalton on the spot.
No,
He's got to make moves.
Let's do
now.
this.
Let's take a break.
Early break, and
Yeah,
then we'll
we'll
talk
go.
a bunch of recruiting the next segment. I can switch over there.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Sounds great.
or if you don't get enough recruiting in, this is what's cool about this setup. Y'all can finish the show. He can get John Harris on. You can come on and do a recruiting feature with him that we can put out as separate content. Or the 3 of us could. Just saying.
Well, you want me to start a thread on the boards, recruiting Q&A?
Could do that. Oh! Whatever y'all can do in the next.
People driving around College Station are getting so upset.
Anthony John Soprano.
But they're going to miss out. I'm sorry. Subscribe. How about that? How about subscribe?
It's 2 of
because
your
we
cups of
don't give
coffee a
away
month.
everything free.
I'm doing
on
it
this
right
radio
now.
show.
Impromptu.
Bronny's starting a segment. Y'all ask the questions. He's going to talk recruiting and portal Q&A segment with Dalton Hughes asking the questions.
We'll do that. We'll talk recruiting country on the other side of the break. TexAgs Radio presented by David Gardner's Jewelers.
Bonus content.
Hold on. So am I doing –
10:18 on TexAgs Radio, presented by David Gardner's Jewelers. We're inside the Rollo Insurance Studio, and it is Recruiting Country, presented by Caprock Health System. The second segment,
well,
as
the first real segment.
First one was maybe hijacked by one Billy Liucci, but people enjoy it, so that's what we're going to keep doing.
I don't get on air with Billy like I used to. Well, I say I used to. I used to have a radio show with him twice a week at lunchtime, but
you did.
Now I think the only time we ever get on radio is if I'm hosting or signing day. So people tend to enjoy whenever we bicker.
Two people yelling at each other. It's good radio. Bronny, Recruiting Country here. We'll start with the news the other day. Don McKinley decommitted from A&M. Seems like that had been headed that way for a while. Finally official.
Yeah, it started moving that direction in terms of him backing away from a pledge from A&M once the firing of Jimbo Fisher was made public. And then it really got supercharged once Elijah Robinson took the defensive coordinator job at Syracuse. It began to sound like from our sources that A&M was going to have a big-time problem holding on to him probably about mid-December, maybe earlier December. Like it's been going this way for a while. And honestly, whenever I saw it actually happened on New Year's Eve, right? And when I saw the tweet, my first reaction was, I'm surprised it took this long. Mm-hmm. Like, I almost forgot that this was supposed to be going this direction because I just anticipated it happening. And I'd said as much in some of the in-home visits that Jason and I had done, that of the unsigned players still left in the commit class, it was going to be much harder to hold on to Don McKinley than it was to Terry Bussey. And they still got work to do to hold on to Bussey, but I think A&M's still in a good spot there. But yeah, it's not a surprise to me that he backed away from his commitment to A&M. Maybe a little bit more surprised that it was LSU, just because we had heard so much Oklahoma and Texas also with Dom. But, it's a tale as old as time in the recruiting world as a kid from Louisiana that LSU really wants. Like, there's been one program that has consistently taken kids out of that state that LSU desperately wants, and it's Alabama.
Yeah.
That's the only one. The other ones have had some success here and there, but on the whole, Alabama's been the only one that can pluck kids out of that state.
Yeah, and so now the only unsigned commit in the class of 2024, obviously, as you said, Terry Bussey. Still work to do, but the Aggies seem to be in a good spot there.
Based on our latest intel, and it's going to take a lot of work and relationship building from Ish Arsteed and Mike Elko and Jay Bateman, but I feel like they've gotten off to a good start there. I just think, Terry's level of comfortability in College Station, the proximity to home, he's going to take visits to potentially Georgia and USC. I just feel like that's not who Terry is, to go to either side of the country and that far away from home. I could be wrong. It's recruiting. But I just feel like the ties to the state of Texas and the ties to the kids in this class, A&M signing Dalen Evans and then signing Miles Davis, two of his best friends that he's gotten to know throughout this recruiting cycle. I think Dalen go ahead and jumping in the boat went a long way for A&M and a long way for Terry's comfortability in sticking with his commitment and ultimately signing with the Aggies in February. But if you're looking at things and how they're unfolding, I don't know. We'll have to see what happens with Holman Wiggins and if there's anybody that's unsigned that may be interested in hearing from A&M now that Holman Wiggins is here, or if they make a late run at an unsigned player, maybe in state or whatever. But I think the majority of their recruiting time and effort is going to be spent on the portal, which means Terry Bussey can get a lot of focus if he's the only or one of very, very few high school targets remaining.
I guess, and that was my next question. Is it still too early in this closing out the 24 cycle? Are there any new targets, or is it still kind of, wading through, looking through the unsigned and figuring out where you're going?
Yeah, I wouldn't even bring up new names. There's some kids in state that haven't signed that Jason and I like, but with the way it is now, and when they're bringing in over 20 guys out of the portal this week, and we're going to add some names to our list on the site probably later today, but when it's going the way that it is with the portal, like the only time a high school prospect gets real, in my opinion now, is if an offer goes out.
Right.
So if you don't see any new 2024 offers go out, then there's no sense in even speculating on this kid, because like an offer means we intend to bring him in on a visit and try to get him. But if they don't ever offer any, like they're not going to bring in unoffered kids, I don't think. Like I would imagine that with the plethora of players in the portal and those still going in, they're going to have plenty of options to fill out roster spots. I wish they would, I do like that they're bringing in some portal running backs because you look at that position, I mean, it's going to be hard for a freshman to kind of get on the field with what they've got. So if they want another impact guy, it's probably going to have to be a portal guy at running back. So and there's a plan, right? And that's something we said about Mike Elko from the get-go is he's got a plan and he's going to be organized and he's going to be able to communicate it. And I think you can see that with his staff. And I also think you can see that now with this first weekend or week really of the dead period being over with and allowing official visits for transfer portal targets. I mean, if you're not a subscriber to the site, you don't know that A&M's bringing in over 20 players this week from today through Sunday out of the portal. That's pretty aggressive. That's way more aggressive than we ever saw the previous coaching staff be in the portal.
Absolutely. And again, texags.com/subscribe. There's a thread transfer visitor list January 3rd through the 7th available on the premium board. We'll talk about the local kid you've talked a little bit about on social media. Nick Scorton, former Bryan Viking, former Purdue Boilermaker in the transfer portal, on a visit today to Texas A&M.
Right now. And I'll have to check on this, but a source in Bryan told me last night that the intention was that they were going to start the visit at midnight, right when the dead period ended. And so that he would be able to come up and meet with a couple of the coaches at midnight and then go home after about an hour, get some sleep, and then come back for breakfast and start a typical 24-hour visit that they would do for an official 24-hour visit. He does have visits scheduled to Florida State, Oklahoma, and Missouri. I like where A&M's at. Ideally, you don't let him get on the plane and go to those places, but you can't really control that. All you can do is put your best foot forward and see what happens. But I think A&M has got a great plan for Nick. I think there's a direct line to him being an impact player in the SEC right down the road from where he grew up, and so that his family can all go see him play. I know there are a lot. I got a ton of texts. Once this became official that he was in the portal and that A&M was going to be a player here, I got a lot of texts from folks around the city of Bryan that were pretty invested in trying to get this kid to come back home. So there's some local momentum to getting him back and seeing him in the Maroon and White. And I would imagine that that will be a huge part of the sales pitch here today. He's got ties to a lot of the coaches because there was a time where Mike Elko was taking a real interest in him out of high school. Now, he didn't get the final say-so on the offers that went out. And also Nick, if you'll remember, Nick in high school was kind of a man without a home. He played off-the-ball linebacker. He played some stand-up edge. He played with his hand in the dirt at defensive end, and he changed positions a couple of times in high school. When he got into a college weight program and a nutrition program, he blossomed into a 6'4", 280-pound monster that led the Big Ten in sacks. So I think there's a lot of draw for A&M, obviously for Nick. And then, with the various programs, you just kind of look. I think Odell Hagens, the defensive line coach at Florida State, has been really running the recruitment for the Seminoles on Nick. I don't know as much about Oklahoma and Missouri's efforts, but it's crazy because, this portal stuff is just so stinking fluid, man, and, how fast stuff can change. We put out that visitor list. It's got over 20 names on it. It could blossom to 40 or get cut down to 10 like that.
Yeah.
It's just this stuff just swings so quickly. So there were kids that went into the portal. You remember the Colin Lacey kid, the receiver from South Alabama. We felt really good about A&M. When he got to campus, all the stuff we heard was positive. When he left campus, all the stuff we'd heard was great and positive. We at TexAgs were getting ready to we had started prepping a commitment story and all this kind of stuff. And then 48 hours later, it's undone.
Yeah.
And he's going to Louisville. It's just this stuff. If you think high school kids, at least with the high school kids, you get to know them over the course of a couple of years as they're getting recruited.
You get to know what they're thinking,
yes,
how their process is, wade through what they're saying. Is this, are they yanking my chain or tell me what
right.
they're really feeling?
So what they've done with the portal is essentially taken 2 years of high school recruiting and shrunk it down into 2 weeks to make a decision. It's crazy. So as much as kids sway and go through ebbs and flows in a 2-year high school recruitment, all that's happening in a 2-week span out of the portal.
It's pretty crazy. And then you look at, one of the names, just talking about the portal in general and how this is working. You got a guy that's committed to another school out of the portal, expected to be on campus this weekend.
Yeah.
That's such a wild, it's not uncommon for high school kids committed to another school to take a visit. I hadn't heard about this until recently in the portal. It's so, condensed down. You'd think, oh, he's committed, that's it. But no.
Some of these kids, I think they go in and they're like, okay, if I'm coming from like an FCS or a G5 level, if I've got a spot at a P5, let me lock that spot in. Mm-hmm. So I know that I can at least go there. And then, especially they've been in the portal since early December, they haven't really got a chance to take some visits. And there's still another couple of weeks until classes start across the country. And, I don't think, A&M's going to have a few of those in this week that are committed elsewhere. It's certainly – I'm trying to think of the right word to describe covering the new age of recruiting in college football. Discombobulated, with a combination of discombobulated and that's the main word. Discombobulated.
All right, well, I've got about 4 texts, one from Bosis and Katie. Are we considering Denver Harris, the former A&M cornerback, went to LSU, now back in the portal?
Yeah, that's going to be a popular question. I think I just opened up the question thread that now we were voluntold that we were going to do, and now going to film right after the show.
We got 50 responses already.
Really?
Yeah.
Go ahead and lock that then.
Okay. Is this like back when we used to do the watch-along? Shoot that guy.
Yeah, that's too many. Too many. I do think that Denver is an option. He will visit this week. Listen, there's nobody's going to be more aware of what has happened with Denver at Texas A&M and LSU more so than Mike Elko and Ish Arsteed. They're very aware of it, right? So you have to imagine that if they are going to bring Denver in on a visit, and first of all, I don't think this was initiated by the Texas A&M staff. Let me say that. I think this was initiated by other people near close to Denver's recruitment that know Denver. I think that's how this was initiated. And you'd have to believe Mike Elko, smart guy,
Ivy League guy,
smart guy. I would imagine there's going to be a lot of one-way conversations taking place. If you're going to do this and come here, you will. This is how you will be. This is how you will behave. And if you don't, I'm not saying they're going to treat him any differently, but there's an expectation that he is, maintains the expectation, the culture of the program. So how that all works out will be interesting, but I do think he's an option for the Aggies. And I do think that there's a chance he's on next year's roster.
Be interesting to follow. Bronny, thank you so much for coming in Recruiting Country.
Thank you.
I'll see you after the show.
For more Recruiting Country.
TexAgs.com/subscribe if you want to check out that feature. I don't think we're going to go live for the people asking. We'll do that pre-recorded off, and then we'll get it posted as soon as Richard wants to get off his butt and work. All right, that'll do it for Recruiting Country. Coming up next on the other side, John Harris. We'll talk about the Texans, Bronny's team. We talked about it a little bit earlier, but fighting for a playoff spot in Houston. We'll do that and more on the other side. You're listening to TexAgs Radio, presented by David Gardner's Jewelers. 1035 TexAgs Radio, presented by David Gardner's Jewelers here inside the Rollo Insurance Studio. Dalton Hughes in this morning for David Nuno, and let's go out to the Brian Foley Law Hotline. When you're hosting the show, there's one man that you call because you know he's always going to deliver great stuff, and you know he's in his good mood because the Texans are vying for a playoff spot down to the Bayou City. Mr. John Harris. John, good morning, sir.
Good morning, Dalton. Boy, it's good to be with you. It's a crazy, crazy, crazy week. It's actually been that way. We had a Christmas Eve game against the Browns. We had the Texas Bowl with the Aggies. We then had New Year's Day with our game against the Titans. Then this game that will be up in Indianapolis precedes a Monday Night National Championship game here. So all of our players, all of our employees are dodging all these national championship people that are putting in the stadium graphics and everything. It's absolute madness right now going on at NRG Stadium.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time to join us. I know you were talking last week with Nuno. It seems like the Texans have been in playoff mode for a while. And you know what? They're winning playoff games if you want to look at it that way, John, because they got the ship right, got CJ back, and getting it done against the Titans.
It's funny. I said to D'Amico Ryans when I was interviewing him after the game Sunday, and I gotta keep in mind that the game is this week Saturday because every game has been Sunday at noon, so we've been just dialed in. So after the game, I said, "Coach, regular season's over." I said, "Playoffs start on Saturday." He kind of chuckled. He's like, "Yeah, it really is that way because this game turns into win and continue. Like you lose it Saturday, your locker clean out day is Sunday." Which is weird, which is like what happens after the playoffs. I mean, this week on radio, we're sitting here going, it could be the last show. It might not be the last show. We don't know. So that's kind of the way playoff football is. So to us, we've already made the playoffs, which is an incredible thing. But it would be even better to make the playoffs, as Jim Moore would have called them a long time ago, the playoffs. I mean, that's the way people reacted when they talked about the Texans. And the playoffs going into this year, there was no chance. And I think it was the same way for the Colts. Now they're breaking in rookie quarterbacks. There's no way. It's not going to happen. And yet, both teams 9-7, winning a year-end situation for both. Now, there is a crazy way that a tie could get both of them into the playoffs, but I don't think either squad wants that after tying last year to start the 2022 season. I think both teams want to walk out of there with a W for sure to make sure they know going into Sunday that they're in the playoffs.
Absolutely. I've listened to you talk about D'Amico enough over the, since he's been hired, and you talked a minute ago about the distractions. You're moving, so many moving parts, Christmas Day, New Year's, everything. How great has D'Amico been in the room with his guys? Being such a recent former player, has that, you think, been a benefit with everything going on around Houston and him leading the charge there?
Yeah, absolutely, Dalton. It's been fantastic to watch him work. And, okay, what's the next challenge? And it's funny, talking to both D'Amico and Nick, we get a chance to interview them each week. And we talk to them, throughout the year as well. But we've asked them often, like, oh, man, you lost this guy. You lost these guys. What are you going to do? And they said they basically just took a stance of we'll figure it out. Okay, you've lost a center for the fourth time. What are you going to do? Okay, well, we're going to go to Michael Dieter. And then Dieter's going to get better and better and better each week. All right, you lost Titus Howard at guard. What are you going to do? Well, we're going to put a rookie in there at guard who probably is a better center. But we're going to put Juice Scruggs over there at guard and see what he does. We'll figure it out. That's been their mantra. Instead of like, oh, God, what are we going to do? I don't know how we're going to do this. They just said, we'll figure it out. Do we have to go claim a guy with waivers? Do we have to go sign a guy? Do we have to take a guy off the practice squad? Do we have to kick field goals with our running back? We've done that. They've figured it out this year, and I think that's been a little different than prior years. Not the Culley, Lovey years, because that was just a mess to begin with. But there was a lot of just crying in their milk when, in the Bill O'Brien years, oh, we don't have this guy, we don't have that guy. And they did a decent job of trying to figure it out. But that's really been the mantra of these guys. Hey, let's figure it out. Whatever we're faced with. C.J. Stroud concussion, what are we going to do? Well, we're going to take our guy who's inactive every week, Case Keenum, and we're going to start him at Tennessee. And we're going to go beat the Oilers, the fake Oilers, on the last play of the game with a Kyrie Fairbairn field goal from 54 yards in their building without C.J. Stroud, without Nico Collins, without Will Anderson. We're going to go beat the Titans. Like, They're going to figure it out. And I think it's been a really interesting mantra to have. And I think more teams need to have that. We'll find it. I know colleges are a little bit more hamstrung with what they can do during a season, but you also have 85 scholarship players. And so there's got to be kind of that point of, oh, we got a bunch of injuries. You know what? Figure it out. Alabama ain't going to feel bad for you. Oh, you have injuries? Okay, well, we won't play Dallas Turner and Chris Braswell. That ain't going to happen. So you have injuries, you deal with it. And so I think it's kind of changed my way of looking at things too, just kind of seeing how they've dealt with it, and how D'Amico has led this team with his energy and his passion, his smarts. It's been really fun to watch him take this team to places that nobody in the city of Houston even thought about. And the ironic thing about it, Dalton, is the fact that if we lose on Sunday or Saturday, it will feel like a disappointment to a lot of people in this town, at least for the first couple weeks, until they step back and realize what this team has done. And look, I don't want to lose on Saturday. There's no doubt about that. But I'm so proud of this team. This is as fun a team as I've been around since I've been here. Every single one of these guys, you see them in the hallway, they say hey to you, that you talk to them for a little bit. They're no jerks on this team. There's all these egos, but they're just good dudes that play hard, that really have a great chemistry between vets and rookies, and D'Amico's really fostered that, and that's made this season really, really fun no matter what happens.
John Harris, footballtakeover.com, and the Houston Texans joining us on the Brian Foley hotline. Let's switch to college. You said you got the national championship game there at NRG on Monday, January 8th. Let's talk about the Sugar Bowl. Texas almost pulled it off, but fortunately couldn't do it.
Couldn't do it is right. That's the best way of saying it. They had their opportunities. And it's funny, Dalton, that was Monday night, right? I think. Mm-hmm. So I had something early Tuesday because everything's moved up for us. So at about a minute 9, I was like, I'm done. I've crashed. There's no way. Washington's going to run this thing out. Texas is not going to have any time. So I go to bed. I wake up to Twitter, and I'm like, wait, what's this play? What the hell happened here? I'm like, did I miss something? So then I go back and I immediately watch the end of the game, and I'm like, man, did Texas blow an absolutely perfect opportunity to have an improbable win? That would have been stealing a win from Washington, because Washington had outplayed them throughout that entire game, especially in the second half. In the second half, it was clear Washington was the better team, and Michael Penix was the much better quarterback than Quinn Ewers. And I've been thinking, okay, Ewers showed a lot in an Alabama game. Well, he's got NFL traits, but when he needed to make some clutch throws down the stretch, the one down to Whittington's easy. The throw to Mitchell, I don't know what he was doing. He didn't have pressure. It really was kind of Ewers in a nutshell. It was like he moved in the pocket, which he can do, but then he throws this ball like, wait, what? Why is he lobbing one up there? If he fires that one to Mitchell, kind of back shoulders it, the DB is already behind him. It's a touchdown, and Texas is playing here in Houston. But he didn't make that throw. And that's one thing. Ewers wasn't the problem that night. The secondary was. That secondary got absolutely torched. And I can imagine Aggie fans are like, yeah, man, November 30th, watch Connor Wigman and what he does in Colin Klein's offense for the Longhorns. But Washington played better. I don't know that Washington can beat Michigan. I mean, Penix is going to have to put the cape on again, but he's doing it against number 1 defense in the country. And it's not Texas defense. So he's going to have to do it again, and I think that's going to be tough. I think Michigan found its balance again with Roman Wilson back healthy, with Corum back healthy, McCarthy back healthy. I think it's going to be really tough to beat Michigan Wolverines on Monday night.
Before we get into the Rose Bowl for a second, let's stay on Penix. You've seen a great rookie quarterback in the NFL this year and what that can mean to a franchise. Watching Penix, is there a throw on the field that guy can't make when he's dialed in? I know he's got great receivers on the outside. But, man, you talk about ball placement, and he just makes everybody right a lot of the times, it looks like.
Yeah, it's interesting. To me, the story of Penix goes back to 2022. They were playing at Oregon, and Oregon was playing a cover 2. So the throw to make against the cover 2 a lot of times is the honey hole shot behind the corner in front of the safety. So Penix has got a route going down the field in between those two guys but it's on the far side of the field. He's on the right hash. This is on the far side of the field. This is a throw that's probably 45 yards or more in the air, and he throws a laser shot. In between those two players, the corner and safety collide. It gets to his receiver, who then runs it in for a touchdown that beats Oregon in 2022. And I just remember thinking, I don't know what quarterback on any planet that we live on could make that throw. That's NFL included. And I just, when I studied him at that point, I thought, there's some things he's got to clean up. There's some inconsistencies in making the throws that we think he can make because he's got that strong arm. But as this year wore on and he put the cape on a few more times, you could see, man, he's really improved his consistency. His accuracy's gotten better. Like his footwork and his, that sort of thing is kind of all askew. I mean, like he'll throw the ball with, you used to do this in baseball. You just stand with your feet straight across and you just torque your hips and then throw, and your feet are not even where they're supposed to be. But they would just work on your hip torque and, throwing the ball that way. He does that from the pocket where he'll stand literally both feet facing ahead and he'll just throw all arm and zoop. And you're like, whoa. So if he could ever really kind of work on his mechanics, there's no telling what he'd be able to do because I think it would improve his consistency. But, boy, he's as fun to watch as anybody. I mean, Jaden Daniels and Michael Penix raised their stock this year through the roof. Now, does it go above Drake May and potentially Caleb Williams because Caleb hasn't declared yet? I don't know. But it's going to make for a really interesting top 5 quarterbacks in this draft thus far. Because if Caleb comes out, Penix and Jane Daniels are already out, and Bo Nix is coming out, you got 5 really solid quarterbacks and beyond. I mean, even more so. What we've seen in Houston is a special dude that's transformed this entire city, this entire organization. That's what those guys can do for their place. I think Penix can do it. I mean, his story is incredible, and I think that will really resonate wherever he goes. I just hope he goes to a place that surrounds him with a coach like D'Amico, talented veterans, an offensive line that's got a lot of experience. Bryce Young went to Carolina, and what do you have in front of him, Dalton?
Nothing.
Tissue paper. Nothing. Frank Reich, not the right guy for him. All those kind of things have got to work, and really they've worked for CJ. And CJ's talked about it all year long, about how that's all helped him. But when CJ needed to put on the cape like Michael Penix has, he's done it. And Superman has shown up and done us some good things throughout the year for sure.
When it's time to talk about all those NFL draft eligible quarterbacks, who declares, who doesn't, the top 5, I'm going to go ahead and say footballtakeover.com is going to be a great place to read about all that when the time comes with John Harris. Going to the Rose Bowl, John, it seems like Michigan just outlasted Alabama. Couldn't run the ball most of the day, but boy, those final couple of drives, the last drive of regulation, obviously found some creative ways to get the ball to Roman Wilson, Blake Corum out of the backfield on 4th and 2. And then in overtime, we could run the ball when it mattered because all it took was 2 Blake Corum runs in overtime to get in the end zone.
Yeah, I mean, that defense kept him in the game. That defense got so much pressure on Jalen Milroe, which I thought was possible because Alabama's offensive line, you guys saw it against A&M. It was not a great offensive line. Milroe, as I've said a few times, Milroe put on the cape throughout the year and would save that offensive line. But Michigan is too good, too deep defensively to do that. But, Michigan's sitting there with 13 points late in the fourth quarter. I mean, it's what, three minutes and change, and they're going for it on 4th and 2. If they don't get that, my gosh. I mean, we're talking about Alabama taking on Washington. So, but Michigan came up with the plays when they needed to. J.J. McCarthy made the play to throw. The Corum is brilliant on 4th and 2. Absolutely loved it. I love that play call. I don't know what Alabama was doing and where they got lost in that particular coverage, but Alabama does that. Alabama gets lost in coverage like that a lot. And then Roman Wilson showed up. He's hard to match up with, and Washington's going to have a hard time with number 1. He's so dynamic, and that fact that he, Corum, and McCarthy are all healthy makes that Michigan offense really, really tough to tackle. And you're right. You used the word outlasted Alabama. I think it was that they just got Alabama to eventually break. And they just kept the pressure on as much as they possibly could. And Alabama, the defense just couldn't hang on for those last drives, one in regulation, one in overtime. They just were dead at that point because Alabama's offense couldn't get them off the field. Made too many mistakes, couldn't move it, no balance. Offensive line got absolutely hammered. That's a really good physical Michigan football team. And I think it probably just burns SEC fans that it's two Big Ten teams taking the stage on Monday night to play one another here at NRG Stadium. You know, in the heart of the South, we got two Big Ten teams playing, which I think just burns a lot of people in the SEC and the Big 12. Man, we got to watch Big Ten football. Yep, you got to watch Big Ten football.
I think one last thing, John. You know, you and I have talked every time I host a show, I feel like, about offensive football. You know, Kyle Shanahan, 49ers, top of our list. We both like what all that is. I feel like the Michigan offense has evolved a lot in the last couple of years, and maybe that is a J.J. McCarthy thing, or maybe it's the advantage of not playing too many people throughout the year. But I feel like they're really built on that. We're going to run the ball at you. But you saw it on that final drive of regulation. They've got a pretty good little bag of tricks. And now, obviously, with athletes like Roman Wilson, it helps, and Blake Corum. But I think I've seen an evolution of Michigan's offense that I hadn't seen under Harbaugh in Ann Arbor the last couple of years.
Yeah, and I think what it's going to mean, Dalton, it's funny, I had this text conversation going on this morning with Andre Ware and Mark Vandermeer, our radio crew. We're always talking about stuff. And so Andre had brought up Bill O'Brien for some reason, and that kind of transformed into what happens with Harbaugh at Michigan. And I said, well, I don't, would Michigan, who would Michigan look at as a head coach? And I was like, there's no way they'd look at Bill O'Brien. I said, Sherrone Moore is going to get that. Sherrone Moore, I think, as offensive coordinator, has really shown something that a lot of offensive line coaches that become offensive coordinators don't do. Like you said, the offense has evolved. And that doesn't happen with offensive line coach, offensive coordinators a lot of times. I think it has with Sherrone Moore. Offensive line coaching background, offensive line, those guys want to run the ball, and they do, and they run the ball really well, but they've evolved. Colston Loveland at tight end is one of the better tight ends in the country. Roman Wilson, Cornelius Johnson at receiver. They've got talent at all those positions. Plus, J.J. McCarthy's passing acumen has gotten better and better. And now that they're all healthy, I think Sherrone Moore's sitting looking at his buffet going, I got everything I want. And you're right. I think it's really, really evolved. But if you go all the way back to the Harbaugh, Andrew Luck days at Stanford, you're kind of seeing a little bit of that offense kind of married with a zone read J.J. McCarthy type offense. So it's really come together kind of beautifully for Michigan. I think it will with the win over Washington on Monday night.
Absolutely. All right, John, we got to cut it there. Appreciate you so much. Thank you for the time. We'll talk to you next week,
You're the best, man. You're the best, man. We'll see you, Dalton. Take care, buddy.
All right, that's John Harris on the Brian Foley Hotline. We'll close the show next on the other side, TexAgs Radio. All right, that'll just about do it for TexAgs Radio on a Wednesday morning. We were going to do Around Aggie Land with Kay Nagley, but guess what? We didn't have time. But Kay's got 3 hours with you tomorrow as she fills in for Nuno. That'll do it for me inside the Rollo Insurance Studio. Louis Bellina's up next. We'll talk to you tomorrow.